Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this virtual meeting of Newcastle City's full council, all those members who are joining me today, and also to everyone watching at home on YouTube. And I wish you all a happy new year. So may I move to ask for apologies?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had apologies from Councillors Ali, Beecham and Karen Robinson.
Thank you. As to the minutes from the 4th of November, does Council agree the minutes of that meeting?
Agreed.
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 I'm not hearing any no's. Type in the chat if you disagree or anything to bring up. No, okay, thank you. So if I can move on to official announcements. On behalf of Council, I would like to congratulate all those with a connection to Newcastle who were recognised in the New Year's Honours list. And special congratulations go to Pat Ritchie on her CBE and to the Lord Mayor's Piper, David Bailey, on being awarded the British Empire Medal. David has served 31 Lord Mayors by my reckoning on a voluntary basis, and his contributions to civic events and citizenship ceremonies are very well appreciated. An emergency oral question has been received from Councillor Stone, and a copy of the question is included in the item circulated for the meeting supplemental pack. Understanding Order 8B7, a member of Council may, with the permission of the Lord Mayor, put a question relating to urgent business of which notice has not been received. And I have given permission for the question to be taken at item 9. This is being dealt with as a matter of urgency because of the winter weather conditions during the Christmas period. And finally, as tonight's City Council meeting will determine the council tax base, I would like to remind members that the guillotine will fall at 9 p.m. rather than 8:30 p.m. If I can move on to item 4, correspondence. Does Council agree to receive the letters from the North East Local Enterprise Partnership, also the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and an additional letter from the Government Equalities Office, which has been included in the items circulated for the meeting pack?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, everyone. There were no petitions submitted this month. So if I can move on to item 6, which is public questions and address. One request to address councils was received for this meeting. So can I invite David McAllister to ask the question on behalf of Keep Our NHS Public North East? David.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I speak on behalf of Keep Our NHS Public North East, and my communication relates to the privatisation of our NHS. Our organisation has many people who are resident in Newcastle, and it comprises mostly members of the general public, together with doctors, nurses and other health professionals who care for the future of the NHS. We strongly believe that the NHS should remain fully funded for its service. Firstly, we wish to thank and show our deep gratitude to all NHS staff and key workers for their work over the past year in extremely challenging conditions. This work continues. As we know, health workers put themselves at risk, and indeed, many have lost their lives in caring for us. To these people, we owe deep respect and gratitude. Moving to my question, you will be aware that the privatisation of the NHS has been a steady and insidious process over a number of years, and therein lies the danger. This privatisation is not happening in one fell swoop, rather a chipping away action with an increasing number of NHS services.
David, you aren't actually very audible on the system. I don't know if you're far from your microphone or it isn't. It's just about audible. But please carry on.
The best I can do is get a bit closer, because I've not used Teams before. Right, okay. How does that sound? Is that okay?
Better, actually, yes.
Right, I'll just try and speak up then, thank you. Moving to my question, you will be aware that the privatisation of the NHS has been a steady and insidious process over a number of years, and therein lies the danger. This privatisation is not happening in one fell swoop, rather a chipping away action, with an increasing number of NHS services being lost to the private sector. Here in the North East, local CCGs are awarding more and more health contracts to private sector organisations, taking nursing, medical and other direct healthcare away from the NHS and putting it into the hands of profit-making companies. To give you 3 examples, a private limited company providing healthcare has based itself in the North East and over the past 4 years has steadily increased in size. It now provides urgent care centres at most hospitals across the North East, including Westgate Road in Newcastle, North Tyneside General Hospital, Berwick Infirmary, Alnwick Infirmary, Hexham General Hospital, Wansbeck General Hospital, Pallion Urgent Treatment Centre and South Tyneside District Hospital. This private limited company is allowed to use the NHS logo and freely shows it in its promotional material. More recently, the pandemic has provided an opportunity for even more health funding to be funneled to big business. Huge contracts have been awarded to private businesses and multinational corporations for track and trace, for COVID-19 testing sites, and questionable contracts relating to NHS data are being made with international tech companies. It is clear that the sudden onset of the virus has provided cover for many private contracts to be awarded without scrutiny or competition, and there remains a danger that these quick fix solutions will remain after the pandemic. In September 2020, Dr. David Wrigley, Deputy Chair of the British Medical Association, stated, and I quote, "We should be empowering and expanding our NHS to undertake additional health-related work and not continually running to the private sector, who have shown time and time again that they are not able to undertake and fulfil contracts to a satisfactory level." More locally, 4 months ago, our group was alarmed to learn that North Tyneside Clinical Commissioning Group, part of the regional network of CCGs, had awarded a contract to a private firm to carry out virtual appointments in primary care across North Tyneside. While this is claimed to be a pilot scheme and to be seen as an addition to the usual GP work, it is undoubtedly part of a very slippery privatisation slope. The firm concerned claims to be Europe's largest digital healthcare provider. It is a profit-making company with shareholders, and we need to make sure that the same thing does not happen in other areas of the North East. Please note that North Tyneside CCG did not inform North Tyneside councillors of this development. Newcastle City Council and Newcastle Gateshead CCG are jointly responsible for the local arm of the integrated care system, and we are keen that our council representatives remain fully aware of the steady, incremental and insidious move to privatisation. As CCGs are under instruction from NHS England, we ask that you are on your guard against inadvertently colluding with the political decision to dismantle our NHS. We are aware of the ongoing support of individual councillors for a publicly funded and publicly provided NHS, and we fully support Newcastle councillors in asking difficult questions, so enabling the possibility of the NHS remaining for all constituents and for future generations. I would be grateful if you would please advise as to what action Newcastle City Council is taking to prevent the steady and insidious NHS privatisation process as I've just described. We would appreciate details of your action so far, as well as future plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'll call on Cabinet Member Councillor Kilgour to respond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Mr McAllister, for your address to Council. Firstly, I'd like to join you in giving thanks to the many care and health workers who've continued to deliver the essential care and support that people in our city have relied on throughout the pandemic. They are the very best of us. Secondly, I want to assure you that as a Labour administration, we are fundamentally opposed to the privatisation of the NHS and believe that NHS services belong in the public sector, delivered in the public interest and not in the interests of making a profit for shareholders. I read recently that Serco saw share rises by 18% despite the abject failure of its contact tracing service. And I'm sure we've all been appalled by the chumocracy evident in the government's awarding of COVID-19 related contracts via its high priority channel. Our ambition is to ensure Newcastle is a healthy city that supports everyone to live long, happy and fulfilling lives, and where residents can live independently in their communities for as long as possible. Significant cuts to adult social care budgets locally and nationally mean that both health and care services have been under huge strain, and the promise of reform to the system is still awaited. The coronavirus pandemic has brought this into sharp focus, and we've continued to lobby government nationally for a fair settlement for adult social care. This will not only support social care to continue focusing on prevention, creating healthy, vibrant neighbourhoods and preventing crisis, but will also relieve the intense pressure on NHS services. While we continue to press for a national solution to this issue, locally we are taking our own proactive steps. On the 17th of December 2020, we were proud to launch an innovative and ambitious new partnership with our NHS partners in the shape of Collaborative Newcastle. This partnership will seek to improve the health, wealth and well-being of everyone in Newcastle and transform the provision of health and social care in the city. The partnership is amongst the first of its kind in the country and is underpinned by a groundbreaking legal agreement between the 4 key health and social care organisations in the city. The agreement accelerates progress towards a fully integrated health and social care system, enabling us all to effect a significant change for residents. Although the Council does not have a veto over national NHS commissioning decisions or the longer-term NHS strategy, as a strategic partner, we do have a strong voice via Collaborative Newcastle to influence the way that local NHS partners and providers deliver services in our city, including influencing how social value is designed for our local communities. As you pointed out, CCGs must work within the framework set out by NHS England. We now have a unique opportunity to reshape this via the government's consultation on integrating care, next steps to building strong and effective integrated care systems. The outcome of this will be key to the future commissioning decisions of ICSs up and down the country. Through this consultation, the Council and its Collaborative Newcastle partners continue to fight for social care to have an equal seat at the table and for decisions around funding, commissioning, governance and service design to be locally accountable and led by local need. We believe change will come about because of positive values of cooperation and collaboration rather than through unnecessary and untimely structural change. Regardless of the outcome of this, locally we will continue to work with our partners via Collaborative Newcastle to ensure that decisions around the delivery of health and care services are accountable and meet the needs and aspirations of our community, and we will resist privatisation wherever we are able to. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kilgour. Mr McAllister, you now have 1 minute to respond.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much for that, Karen. So what we're experiencing is the planned strategic dismantling of our healthcare system by the government, cascaded from NHS England to Newcastle Gateshead CCG. There are no two ways of looking at this. It is crucial that we keep a very keen eye on the overall picture. Members of Newcastle City Council, together with members of Newcastle Gateshead CCG, sit on the Newcastle Wellbeing for Life Board, and you are responsible for health provision in the city. You are a partner in decision making regarding our health services. As councillors, you will utilise systems to ensure that comprehensive and up-to-date information about health services outsourcing in the Newcastle area is always available to you. So what systems are you using, and do you feel that this important outsourcing information is accessible to you? Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Councillor Kilgour has in fact responded to your questions, and no doubt you'll, if you wish to follow up, you'll email her for that. So if I can move on to item 7, which is the council tax base and business rates base, I call on Councillor McCarthy to move the report, which will be seconded by Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm really pleased to present this, what I hope, Lord Mayor, is a straightforward report as normal. And I'm sure colleagues will be pleased to know that I won't be taking my 20 minutes that's allocated, given that this is part of our budget process, Lord Mayor. Colleagues know that by law we've got to set our council tax base before the end of January each year, which is why this report is an important part of our whole funding preparations before the budget process, which will come to council in March, Lord Mayor. And it informs our precepting authorities, which is why it includes information on the parishes. Police and fire obviously use this data to help them be best prepared for their processes too, Lord Mayor. The proposals before us are our best guess, given the current situation that we're in, given the pandemic and the economic challenges I think that we are facing as a city. Those factors have been built into, considered in pulling this report together, and the figures that are proposed before us this evening have taken those factors into account. Lord Mayor, as usual, this is a very long and detailed report with a number of appendices so that we're being fully open and transparent in everything that we are agreeing this evening, and the council tax reduction scheme details are included. What we have done is, in the council tax reduction scheme, is to adjust the bands in the scheme based on the details in the RPI in September. And we're also, Lord Mayor, assuming very little pay inflation. We think the private sector and the public sector are unlikely to have significant pay rises this year, and we've taken that into account too. So the figures that are before us in the papers this evening have been used to base the budget proposals that we're currently out to consultation on. Lord Mayor, we're not changing the council tax reduction scheme this year. It does seem to be working well, although it is constantly under review, but this would have been an appropriate time to make changes if we were choosing to do that. So in terms of the detail of the paper that's before us, we're proposing just under 1%, a reduction of the number of dwellings that are counted in comparison to last year. Lord Mayor, colleagues will be aware this is normally an increase year on year, but because of the economic and financial situation that residents are currently in, we're taking a much more prudent approach this year. And that obviously has a consequence in terms of the amount of council tax income that we would expect to receive over the course of the year. We do, Lord Mayor, colleagues will probably be aware of this, we've had the promise of a grant from government that will help towards that. And of course, we will make sure that that's built into our budget proposals. The parish information is in the report, and the business rates base is there too. Lord Mayor, I just want to ask members to be reassured about the methodologies that are used. We include that Appendix A each year, so the formula is there in the public domain. And on business rates, Lord Mayor, we're assuming a fall of 6.3% in the budget proposals. That again is already built into the proposals for the budget that are out for consultation. I'm very happy to move the report that is before us, Lord Mayor. I hope it's a straightforward report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bell.
Lord Mayor, I second the report and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, and I'll now call on Councillor Ferguson to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'll just say at the outset, as a caveat, that unfortunately I had an IT issue just at an inopportune moment, so I have missed part of what Councillor McCarthy said, unfortunately. But having said that, you know, this is a regular report. It is in large part a technical document. I don't think that it's necessary for me to take 20 minutes to speak to its contents, because I have all trust in officers' ability to get these issues sorted out and make sure that what we're basing our calculations on are robust and can be trusted. One of the things that I think it's fair to note in this document that I would particularly call attention to is the manner in which the council tax base is having to be revalued, and ultimately my understanding is that is as a result of the anticipated financial hardship that many people will be facing in the coming year. And I think that it is odd to find in the middle of a technical document actually such a stark reminder of some of the serious financial hardship that people in this city will be facing as a result of the pandemic, as they struggle to make ends meet and may struggle to pay their council tax. So I'm glad that the council is bringing forward changes to the boundaries for the council tax reduction scheme. It has been good to see that the government has implemented a council tax hardship fund, but I don't think that we should be complacent about the challenges that many people in our city will be facing with their finances in the days, weeks, months, and indeed possibly years ahead. So my thoughts are very much with them this evening as I look at this document, and I found it surprising that that has been my reflection actually as I've looked at it, that was the thing that really stood out to me. Nothing else to add other than that, Lord Mayor. I'm very happy with what the document says otherwise, and that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I believe Councillor Hall wishes to speak to this motion.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I welcome the report, and I don't have any specific issues with the proposals as they are laid out. That being said, council tax and business rates as a general concept are not really fit for purpose in the 2020s. Council tax places a burden on occupiers and not owners, as well as being based on 30-year-old property valuations, whilst business rates place a disproportionate burden on brick and mortar retail and suppress investment in key industries such as manufacturing that choose to invest in their businesses. As a party, Liberal Democrats have for many years called for fundamental reform and replacement of council tax and business rates with a system that uses land values and places more burden upon owners than occupiers. Just as an example of the potential benefits, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation calculated that more progressive property taxes could reduce the median household bills by up to £279 a year, and two-thirds of household bills could fall by more than 10%. I feel that we should, as a council, be calling for this fundamental reform, or at the very least for the recalculation of the property values from these current 30-year-old figures, which again disproportionately affect Newcastle, where property growth has been slower than across the rest of the country. As a party, again, we've called for replacement of business rates in England with a commercial landholder levy based solely on the land value of commercial sites rather than their entire capital value, thereby stimulating investment and shifting the burden of taxation away from tenants to landowners. I'll not take up any more time, but I hope that in the future we can come together and advocate for this nationally to try and redress the balance of these fundamentally unfair taxes. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Does anyone else wish to speak or comment on this report? Okay, then I'll call on Councillor Bell, who reserved the right to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and Happy New Year to all of my colleagues, and particularly to you, Lord Mayor and Chair of the Council. I'll not take too long of Council's time tonight, but we have to remember, as Councillor McCarthy pointed out, that this is a statutory responsibility, and I would hope that this will pass through full Council tonight, and indeed it sounds as if it probably will. This is never an easy task for us, Lord Mayor, and this year it's been especially more difficult with various issues and huge uncertainties. For example, we're a nation now that's moved out of the European Union with a not so oven ready deal. As a nation, we are battling an international pandemic and the horrendous impact this has had on individual families, us as a city and the nation as a whole. And should we also bear in mind, Lord Mayor, that when we're trying to do this, the pandemic has actually cost the councils across the country over £11 billion and still counting. The government has so far refunded less than half of that. So the government has done nothing to fundamentally change the fact that councils will be forced to make severe cuts to balance the books. And the impact of austerity, Lord Mayor, if I can just mention that over the last decade, that is far from over. Austerity that has left this council £305 million worse off. Lord Mayor, despite what I've just said there, I and the continuing significant financial and economic challenges, our ambition for Newcastle is undiminished. We will continue to invest in the care that protects and supports the most vulnerable in our city. We will continue to deliver services to children and young people that give them the greatest chance possible and a future success in whatever they choose to do. And we will continue to support our businesses and work with them in whichever way we possibly can to provide the best opportunity right here in our great city. Lord Mayor, as I said, I won't take very long, and what I would urge Council to do is unanimously support this report this evening. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I now call on Councillor McCarthy to reply.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for the support for the proposals that are before us. I think Councillor Ferguson is absolutely right that we aren't totally clear about the challenges that are ahead of us in relation to either council tax or in relation to business rates, and we will have to keep monitoring that, I think, over the next few months. We cannot possibly understand where we're likely to be, you know, in a month's time, let alone in 3 or 4 months' time, Lord Mayor. And I think I agree with Councillor Hall that we need a review of the whole system. Council tax, you know, as we will have this discussion when we get to the budget at full council, Lord Mayor, you know, using council tax to fund adult social care is regressive, and that is not fair on residents of our city. And I know we'll come back to that in March. So, you know, I don't necessarily support what the Lib Dems are proposing, Lord Mayor, but we definitely do need to review. And I would expect that business rates will not be fit for purpose, having been through this pandemic too. But I think those discussions, Lord Mayor, are for the future, not for tonight. So can I just reassure colleagues across the council that this is a technical report. It is about making sure that we agree the figures on which we're basing the budget, which will come back in March. And like Councillor Bell, can I ask for support for this report, Lord Mayor? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. So we'll now move to a name vote on the recommendations in the report using the GoVote app. So if members would like to operate this, whatever device they're using to do this, and can I ask the 2 members who were having trouble before the meeting started if they are still able to, if they're able now to use GoVote? If not, I will have to ask you to indicate verbally how you're voting.
Lord Mayor, can I just say that I inadvertently pressed an abstain, but in fact mine is a yes vote.
Well, yeah, you've time to change it. You can change it.
I can change it, can I? Oh, well, fair enough then.
Yes, that's, are you number 19?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Councillor Hunter, you were having problems earlier on. Have you been able to vote?
Sorry to disturb you, Lord Mayor. He's just rang me on my mobile. Ooh.
And did he approve the recommendations in the report? We can't hear him. Councillor Robinson, you're muted.
I'm waiting for him. I think he's. Oh. Right. Lord Mayor, he's still having problems. So I don't know if you would take a raised hand that he's accepting it.
Yes, we can take that.
Right.
Would you like me to close the vote now?
Yes, yes, please. The report is accepted with no. The recommendations are accepted with no one against. Thank you for that, colleagues. If I can now move on to item 8, which is the Safe Newcastle plan, I'll call on Councillor Penny Evans to remove the report, which is to be seconded by Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm sorry I've been having problems with my Wi-Fi, so hopefully I will be able to get through this little bit before I crash again. As Chair of Safe Newcastle Board, I'm pleased to bring this Safe Newcastle plan to Council this evening. As members are aware, Safe Newcastle is our city's community safety partnership. I want to thank all members of the Safe Newcastle Board from the council services, the police, public health, Nexus, NHS, voluntary sector, fire service, the Violent Reduction Unit, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Your Homes Newcastle, the universities, probation and youth offending team for all their work throughout the last year and for the work in this year as well. Newcastle is a safe city. We've worked hard over many years to improve community safety, to tackle offending and protect and support victims, which has resulted in sustained period of reduction in crime. However, there has been an increase in more recent years, both nationally and locally, in recorded crime levels. Some of this increase can be partly explained by improvements in recording practices and changes in the way that victims are supported through the criminal justice process. These are, however, signs that some crime is increasing in real terms in respect to violence. That's why here in Newcastle, over the last few years, we've continued to focus on emerging issues which impact on our communities, the safety of our residents, ensuring that we are prepared and aware of potential issues such as hate crime, county lines and exploitation. These priorities sit in addition to the vast amount of work that we already deliver across the partnership to tackle other aspects of crime and disorder, support victims and improve community confidence. We continue to face the significant task of meeting existing challenges of increasing need in the context of unprecedented year-on-year cuts. Austerity all public services really do impact on the work that we can deliver as a partnerships to our communities, families and individuals. They present us with difficult choices around demand and how we continue to deliver services. Nevertheless, they also highlight the importance of partnership working. By working together to tackle key issues, we can deliver the best use of limited resources across all sectors and agencies. All services this year have had to adapt and respond to the pandemic, but we've all continued to support our residents and communities and hope that they continue to feel safe. Being safe is really important to residents and communities. The priorities in this plan were consulted with residents who overwhelmingly agreed with these priorities. Crime is not only expensive in how it impacts on businesses and communities, it also causes distrust and fear between people and communities. Victims can be frightened, less confident, and damages repaired and property to be replaced, as well as time off. And in these unprecedented times, when people are already struggling, it's really more important than ever to ensure that we are combating these issues. That's why we will continue to work with our partners to tackle crime, reduce victims and build confidence in our communities, because we are stronger together. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Penny Evans. There were a couple of brief interruptions there, but nothing serious. Thank you very much. Councillor McCarthy.
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to formally second this report. Thank you.
A number of members have indicated they wish to speak to the report, so I'll start with Councillor Lower.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've got 3 or 4 things, but some of them you won't be able to answer tonight, so I'll just ask if you can get back to me on them. I wanted to know about violence against women and girls and whether there's been any increase in numbers since the lockdown and over the holidays when we were freed again for a while. The second one is deployable CCTV. I just wondered how much there actually is of it and who manages it and how it's deployed, who decides that. And The next one was prevent referrals. Just how many are there in the system, and has it risen anything over the last year? If that's okay. And the final one was just an idea of how you managed to do the consultation and how many people you got to, given it was with lockdown. Thank you.
Councillor Penny Evans, do you want to respond to that now or take?
I think I best do a little bit of a response now in case I drop off again. But there are some things like can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, over to you.
It's just there'll be some things where I might drop out, and I'd really like to be able to answer some of the questions. Councillor Lovatt, in terms of the consultation, it happened last December because this plan came into force from April this year. So it was a let's talk consultation with residents showing overwhelming, like 95% agreed with reducing drug and alcohol, 94% about tackling serious crime. You know, so we did get quite a good response, but again, that was pre-lockdown, Councillor Lovatt. In terms of prevent referrals, yes, what we've done this year is we have seen an increase in our referrals through schools before the lockdown and closure of schools because of the work that we've been doing within schools with our education officer. Unfortunately, like with everything, through lockdown, referrals have dropped from schools as schools were closed, and obviously now schools are closed again. We don't really be anticipating that, but we've been able to offer training and different ways of engaging with schools. But like I said, unfortunately, with lockdown, lots of services, including voluntary sector and community services that would make referrals, have actually been again either staff on furlough or people closed. So we have seen an increase, and we are pushing to make sure that people know about how to refer, because actually it's through referring in, because prevent is a safeguarding issue, that we can make a decision on whether or not that needs to progress or actually we need to refer to safeguarding. On deployable CCTV, I will have to get back to you on that point. I'm not sure about all of the resources we've got. And then in terms of domestic abuse, I think most organisations saw a decrease with reports of domestic abuse during the initial lockdown. I think in Newcastle we had like a decrease of about 30% of reports and requests for specialist support. But obviously once lockdown ended, the police and ourselves have seen an increase. But it's really key that we make sure people are aware that all of our services have continued to operate during lockdown, and that if anybody is suffering, we could make it, all of councillors and all members could make available the numbers of support areas, such as some of our support services to residents, and could get involved with pushing out those numbers so that people know that we are still available and we are still there to help. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the plan, Claire. I mean, obviously, much of this is very familiar as a recent former chair of Safe Newcastle. So, firstly, I just want to put on record my support and thanks to the partnerships that are involved, the different agencies involved in producing the plan. And I know that it's always been quite a challenge trying to narrow down the number of priorities for focus. I think there's a couple of observations and perhaps a question. I think that there's clearly still a significant issue and concern around domestic violence and domestic abuse in the city, and that's something that obviously is a major concern. And we hear anecdotally, despite the fact there was, from what Claire's last comment, around a decrease in recording, I think we're in unusual times. Anecdotally, it's certainly the case that there is major concern of growing cases of domestic abuse, family abuse, and whether people even feel they're in a position to report because of the circumstances, being locked at home, people find themselves in. So I think my question to the plan and to Claire as the chair is really about whether there might be an opportunity to do some detailed work into particular aspects of the plan and priorities, taking into light the circumstances, and a review focus for next year. Thank you.
Councillor Penny Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kemp. So in respect to some of the work on the domestic abuse, like important that people are aware that they can report, but I think many people thought during lockdown that services were stopping or ceasing, so that's why it was really important during the summer that we did a campaign pushing out the numbers and information about the service. Oh, I'm getting a message about bad quality. Oh. And also that we worked with the Police and Crime Commissioner as well, who ran a really brilliant campaign around domestic abuse being everybody's business. And that really to everybody on all social media networks to try and say, if you see something, you know, please get in touch. It's not just about it's just not safeguarding is everybody's business, but domestic abuse is too. In terms of drilling down as well, and yes, there are quite a few priorities within this, but like I said, some of these priorities were achieved via consultation last year. But there are a few things that I think are important to highlight through COVID. And that, again, is the domestic abuse that you've said, but also antisocial behaviour, because we had a really good track record of reducing antisocial behaviour within our city. Unfortunately, with COVID and the government muddying the waters around COVID breaches being classed as antisocial behaviour, we've seen the figures rise massively. And I know a lot of people in the city were suffering from antisocial behaviour in terms of noise complaints rose massively. There was disturbances in garden parties during lockdown. There was worries about partying in the park, alcohol abuse in various parts of the city around the quayside and in Oostburn. So definitely antisocial behaviour has become much more of a priority, I think, than it was previously. And we're really reuniting our work in that area in our subgroup. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huddart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Some of your priorities, Councillor Penny Evans, were about street begging. And I know this has happened in the city centre. I think we've all seen that there. But lately we've had episodes of this locally. And we found people are camping outside of fast food restaurants or takeaways and cafes, asking people to buy them sandwiches, drinks, pasties, etc. Residents don't like it. They feel they're being harassed. The police know about it. So do the various support agencies around, like the homeless team. But it is happening increasingly on Chillingham and Heaton roads, which are part of Heaton Ward. And I wondered what Councillor Penny Evans is doing to reduce this kind of behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huddart. I think when you mentioned that this was part of our priorities, I think that's because it becomes part of the antisocial behaviour part, because obviously the key priorities this year are antisocial behaviour, harm and reduction around drug and alcohol, violence against women and girls, tackling serious and organised crime, prevent, and for them and adverse childhood experiences. But yes, I understand that it's really disturbing to see people who are begging. What I would be saying to people is that it's really important that people get in touch with organisations such as Street Zero, and because and the Rough Sleepers organisations to make sure that these people, if they are homeless or they are in need, that they get the help and support that they need. And we've certainly pushed that information out in Heaton Ward, as some residents have got in touch with us about this, because it's really important to understand that, you know, there are people out there who make money out of, who treat begging as an occupation, and it's really important for members of the public to protect themselves, but to all support from all other organisations to make sure the right support is being put in place, because we don't want to be encouraging people. And that's what the teams will do. They'll go out there and they'll speak to people and they'll really reassess and see what their needs are.
Well, can I just say that we have been in touch with the organisations that you've mentioned, the homeless team. Some of these people are not homeless, they're living in hostels. The police say some of the people they can't deal with because they actually should be dealt with by the mental health services, etc. So some of us have actually been passed from pillar to post with when trying to report these incidents, because we want residents to be able to go to the shops, pick up their shopping and go on their way and not be harassed.
Thank you. I think you answered that question yourself and some of the things that you'd already done, but thank you, Councillor Huddart.
Okay.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Hi, Claire. Obviously, I'm going to ask something from an education perspective, because obviously Prevent has an education officer. So can you give me an example of the sort of work that they would do in schools? And also, are schools taking up this offer of having this resource? Thank you.
I'm really sorry, Councillor Holland, I missed the last bit of your question. But in terms of the Prevent Education Officer, yes, and it's really important actually, because it's part of Ofsted that schools do get involved with Prevent. You know, it's part of that procedure. And our education officer has been engaging with schools around training staff, but also we've been also doing some work within schools and young people about highlighting what issues are around online safety, keeping people safe online, but also around some of the far right information that we've had. We've had training on that. We've had an individual who went into some schools before lockdown who had previously been a member of the terrorist organisations and had gone in and told about their experience. And that really lived experience and being able to talk about the issues and tell people how they got sucked into a life like that. Everything that was involved was really important, and it was really beneficial to young people to get that viewpoint. But in terms of our work, definitely liaison with schools and providing training and support, but also doing that bit of signposting about what is a referral. Yes, we'll accept that referral. This is how to go about it, and just really pushing out the message.
Thank you. I just was also inquiring, are schools taking up the offer for this resource?
Oh. Thank you. Yes, we have had some schools that have taken up this offer, and we are getting more and more involved. And I think the key is to our Prevent service and our Prevent education officers training is free to all schools. There is no cost involved at all to any schools to get involved. I think some of the schools in the city have buy-in Prevent training. So I would just push out again that our training is free, and please get, you know, and we know our Prevent worker, education worker, is linked so much to all the other services that, you know, it's probably the better training, but I would say that. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and Happy New Year, everyone, or as happy as it can be under the circumstances. Going back to antisocial behaviour, I was quite surprised that there was no reference at all to Operation Oak in the plan or in Councillor Penny Evans's report later on in the documentation. Operation Oak is the only active way of dealing with night noise as it's happening in the city, as as it stands. And given that, my concern, my worry about it not appearing in any of these strategies is that certainly Ousbourne Labour have campaigned against Operation Oak in the past, although I think they've come around to its usefulness more recently, because it did a wonderful job in helping contain the massive outbreak we had of COVID in Ousbourne and the 2 Jesmond wards recently. So I was really asking Councillor Penny Evans for an unequivocal endorsement and support for Operation Oak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane, and I know that yourself and the Labour councillors in Ousbourne, as well as the councillors in Jesmond and Heaton, all attended the brilliant network meetings we had during the summer around tackling antisocial behaviour, where we got the university and the police and council services all together. I think that was a really brilliant example of partnership working, but also coming together and really understanding the issues. And yes, I know that Operation Oak was funded by the university and the police, and is going to be funded now until March next year. And I will definitely say that I wholeheartedly support Operation Oak. It's been fantastic. It's done some really great work.
Thank you, Councillor Penny Evans. I'll take the 6th and final contribution from members, who will be Councillor Wendy Young.
Right, thank you, Lord Mayor. My question's also about antisocial behaviour, which is a persistent problem in North Jesmond, as well as South Jesmond and Ousbourne and Heaton, where there's quite a dominance of student population. Anyway, COVID restrictions mean that some people will inevitably continue to socialise within their homes, sometimes causing serious disturbance and distress to their neighbours. And can you tell me what measures will be put in place to deal with this problem in my own ward and across the city?
Thank you, Councillor Young. And again, I wanted to just again pay highlight to that work that yourself and other councillors did alongside the antisocial behaviour team, but also alongside the universities and the police, and everybody coming together to really look at the issue and look at what things you could put in place. And I pay tribute to yourselves for the excellent work that you've been doing. I know that yourself and Councillor Story have been inundated with complaints, and it's been an awful lot of work for yourselves. And I think that's another reason why Operation Oak has been fantastic. It's been a great opportunity for people to be able to use that resource and to deal with some of the issues around house parties and antisocial behaviour in terms of students. I know that police officers have been issuing fixed penalty notices. At the start of the pandemic and the lockdown, it started with warnings, but obviously as things continued and people weren't listening necessarily to some of the warnings, the police stepped and have been giving fixed penalty notices, including for breaching any regulations around COVID. And I know the university have been taking action as well. And we'll continue as well to make sure that we are putting things in place, including SAP meetings, and ensuring that we've got officers time to be able to support anybody within around antisocial behaviour, because we recognise that this has been an issue, like I said, across the city, but particularly in some of the areas where the students have been.
Councillor McCarthy, I can't remember whether you'd reserved the right to contribute.
I didn't, Lord Mayor, I just formally seconded.
And thank you very much. Councillor Penny Evans, do you want to make any concluding remarks?
Lord Mayor, I just again want to thank all the staff involved with this across the services, because I know that, and specifically the police as well, because I know that they've been under enormous pressure where this government seems to just keep heaping lots and lots of extra work and rules and regulations on them. So I just also want to thank everybody involved with the work, but particularly the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
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 Agreed, Lord Mayor.
Agreed. Any contras, please type in. Agreed. Thank you. If I can move on to item 9, which is the Education and Skills Annual Report, I call on Councillor Holland to move it.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As a newly appointed Cabinet Member for Children, Education and Skills, I'd like to just put on record my thanks to all staff and the previous portfolio holder, Councillor Veronica Dunn, for all their dedication to this portfolio area. Children and young people will always be a priority for the city, as we know a good education and having stable and caring people in your life contributes greatly to people's success and happiness in life. This annual report is 2019 to 2020. It highlights much of the excellent work achieved across the service and also highlights some of the huge challenges faced by coronavirus and lockdown. I have to say I'm very humbled and extremely proud of how our staff, schools, children's services and all of our partners responded during these very testing times, so that by the autumn term we had ensured a safe return for children in our city. Unfortunately, that now feels like a lifetime ago. Now we are in a new academic year, a new year I should say, and facing new challenges. I've every faith that we will overcome them despite the government's consistently incompetent and chaotic handling of the pandemic and the unprofessional manner in which they have dealt with educational provision. Late and conflicting guidance, U-turns, threats of legal action, some of which were just today, demonstrate, in my view, their inability to truly engage with education professionals and trade unions to look at real solutions. Instead, they blindly insist they know what's best and take no account of the anxiety and stress they're putting everybody through. As schools are the centre of all our communities, perhaps consideration could be given to vaccinating all school staff on site, so that our children can return to learning. This, in my view, would go a long way in reducing the fear and anxiety of school staff and parents and help our children getting back to what they love to do, which is the freedom to learn and play. Lord Mayor, I'm happy to take questions on this annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor McCarthy.
Can I formally second this report for discussion, Lord Mayor? Thank you.
Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by adding my thanks to the officers who compiled the report and the staff working with our children and young people every day. Can't be underestimated the effort, time, commitment and support staff have provided to children and families, and many officers have gone further than the extra mile that they normally do in these times. Whilst the report certainly does highlight some excellent achievements, Councillor Holland herself admits in the foreword there are improvements to be made and challenges to meet. The report is a snapshot of what's happening across the city. These plans are vital to ensure children are given resources and support to enable them to access the specific curriculum that meets their individual needs. Without the timely provision of these plans, children will miss out on funding and support, which may negatively affect their progress. Can we be reassured that the aim is to complete all AHCPs within the required time frame? As stated on page 23, 44.6% of pupils who were permanently excluded from our schools had an identified special education need or disability. I find this a staggering figure and want to be reassured by Councillor Holland that work is being carried out to meet the needs of these young people, and the priority is to keep them in school. A key driver in improving schools is attendance, and it was worrying to read that Newcastle during 2019 to 2020 had the 6th highest absence rate in secondary schools and the 13th highest in primary schools out of 152 local authorities. Rates are which continuing to rise. This cannot be allowed to continue, and we need to know what specific measures are going to be implemented following a full opening of schools. My final question links back to the foreword and the key priorities of the Council for children to be, amongst other things, safe and happy. Page 14 of the report highlights the fact that for a number of 16 to 17-year-olds, a higher number than the national average in Newcastle, that this is not the case. Young people identified as not in education, employment or training, or not known, are much more likely to become involved in criminal activity. Many of us have had a rise in antisocial behaviour and petty crime over the past few months, which may or may not be linked to the lack of supervision and support provided to these young people. However, it is imperative that the Council prioritise these young people and do what is necessary to make sure that no child is left behind. Can Councillor Holland assure us of this? I will finish with an observation. The report is heavily populated with percentages, and we all know that percentages mean nothing unless related to real numbers. For example, 40% of nothing is nothing, as we don't have the numbers to judge it against. Can I request for the next report we have real numbers relating to these percentages? Thank you.
Councillor Holland, do you want to take that now or at the end of everybody's contribution?
No, I think I better, because actually that was a lot of questions. In terms of the format, in terms of percentages and real numbers, I'll take that back to the officers who do write the report, Mark Patton in particular, and see what can be done about that. In terms of school improvement overall, which is a main thrust here of what Councillor Morrissey has raised, is that obviously steps are in action. We do have an excellent promise board which meets regularly every month, which is heads who represent clusters of schools in their areas, and their main task, if you like, is to drive school improvement forward. They do this through a sort of hub and spoke effect, taking on board sort of schools that are in their area. Within those hubs, they share good practice and they look at training and they look at initiatives and everything to help drive improvement up. So, for example, around schemes around attendance and absence and things like that, they would share sort of good practice to see what can be put in place. One of our new developments around schools, which we're hoping to actually expand out, is that we're starting to put in social workers in schools, which we refer to as SWIS. These social workers are there in schools to help with these particular issues and to take off some of the strain off head teachers and teachers, so that basically they'll take on board a lot more of the pastoral care within schools. And certainly in the way social services, children's services is developing, we're going to go for a very sort of family valued process, where basically we'll be looking at wrapping services around children and the families, because, you know, children who don't attend school may have other issues at home, and that might be a reason for their absence. In terms of some of the issues around education, health and care plans, yes, that number is low. I agree with you about that. Certainly COVID, when that started, that caused us a huge amount of problems, because obviously access to children, particularly around those specific plans, around educational health and the care and SEND plans, became extremely difficult, because you can't write those plans without actually seeing the child and without seeing the child and their family or their home environment. So yes, I agree, that is an area of improvement, and we've been very clear in the report that we do have areas for improvement. In terms of NEET, the same issue occurs with NEET. We can get access to children obviously through school, and we look at their transition into higher education or into traineeships, apprenticeships, the very few that there are. But again, that also is based on having conversations with those young people. It's not always ideal to have these conversations on phone or online, and we have been using things like libraries, community centres, school areas to talk with young people. So those numbers have dropped, and those numbers have shown an increase. Obviously, I can assure you that we are doing everything possible and trying as many flexible methods as we can to actually deal with some of those issues. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd just like to thank everybody who's been working in education across the city for all the hard work that they've done during what's got to be the most challenging term they've ever been through. I'd also like to thank Councillor Holland for the work that she's done to support local schools since taking up the post, especially this weekend when a lot of primaries faced really tough decisions about how to open safely. And I think a lot of these decisions that had to be taken were so difficult, partly because, as everyone working in education will be acutely aware, the first lockdown had a huge impact on the mental health and well-being of many young people, some of whom might not have been previously identified as vulnerable. So given that we've now entered a new lockdown, I'd just like to ask what support schools have given to young people who are suffering, struggling with their mental health, and what support they might see in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Has everyone got their mic off? Because I'm getting quite a bit of feedback. But yes, dealing with children's mental health issues has been a really key factor, especially during the lockdown. And certainly our psychology service has worked very well with schools in terms of producing information and guidance around support. And one of the things he did put together was a support package about getting young people to talk about their emotions and about why they worry. These are all important aspects, and they're different tools for teachers to use with children around their anxiety and their concern. Mental health will impact hugely on children, and it will be impacting massively also on their parents. So I think that's another reason why we need to always look at children within the sort of parental group as well. I know schools have done as much as they can in terms of making sure that young people do feel safe in the schools, addressing their fears, looking at bubbles, looking at friendship groups and things like that, because these are all the things that children do miss greatly when they're not at school, and they are really, really important for their mental health. And obviously mental health and worry and anxiety is a huge contributor in terms of absences as well for children, which always need following up obviously by the schools and if necessary by specialist services such as psychiatric services within schools. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins has a point of information which I'm obliged to take.
Oh, right.
Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, it's just a point of information regarding questions, Lord Mayor, because I recollect that at a previous council meeting, one of your predecessors gently chided me for my question being rather too lengthy. I've just heard a question which probably was one of the lengthiest questions I've ever heard. It was almost a speech. So I'm just seeking some guidance from you on questions in relation to Cabinet members' report and your advice about the length of those questions.
Yes, I did overlook that one, and if I could ask members to keep their contributions to 3 minutes, please. Thank you for that. Move on to Councillor Cott.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, Councillor Holland. And please could you pass on my thanks to council officers, particularly Mark Patton and his team in this area, because I know they do an extremely good job. And I know also as a school governor that they provide a lot of support to schools, and I'm very grateful to all the work they do. I also wish you well, as this is, I think, your first formal time presenting a report. I was slightly disappointed with your preamble, which was a kind of typical council good, government bad kind of approach. I appreciate the politics of all of this, but actually a lot of the things that you mention as positive things do depend on central government funding. So I think you want to be a little careful around some of those things. But a few points from me. One of the things about this report is I take it as a report, as kind of like a review over the year, and a number of the issues that have been raised have been things looking forward, which is fine. Of course, they're important. Of course, the big thing, the elephant in the room has been the COVID-19 crisis. And one of the things that's mentioned in the report is about safeguarding and the checks that have been undertaken. So my first question is really about the statistical information. What statistical information exists to support the evidence of the safeguarding checks that have been undertaken, and what impact has COVID-19 had on well-being, health and safeguarding? Are there any measurable statistics you could point us towards at this stage? Connected with that, although something separate, I did notice in the report it mentioned that there were 99 families in Newcastle who were reported as children missing from education. I'm wondering whether we should be worried about that and what advice you could give us. The other issue, there's a lot of ambition there, and of course we have to be ambitious, and you're right to be ambitious, and Newcastle's right to be ambitious for our children and young people, but particularly in areas like school effectiveness, NEETs, as we've been talking about, are we actually going to be able to achieve our targets in the next year? I'd be interested in your view about that, because of course we have ongoing challenges coming up, but there's a serious risk of children being disadvantaged, and probably we'll talk more about this on your portfolio report as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, it is an annual report, and so that's why it isn't full of statistical information, as you point out. But obviously we can get that information to you. I'm sure Mark Patton would oblige in that, as he's a person who obviously penned the report along with his colleagues. The 99 missing children, yes, all of those children are checked, and we do find them. The reason that a lot of them are missing from school or school registers is that they've moved house, they've potentially gone abroad during the summer, possibly to visit family, and then when they've returned, they're not on a roll. So all of those children are checked out, and I'm assured by Children's Services that they are. So there are a number of reasons why they go missing, and certainly it is a key part of our task is to get them on a school roll and get them back into the education system. In terms of targets around NEET, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of this virus. Obviously, we haven't got off to a very good start at the start of this term. All I can say and all I can assure you is that we do have extremely dedicated staff who will be looking out for those children and trying as much as they can and being as creative as they can and meeting with them and ensuring that they make good choices. Unfortunately, the exam system and certainly vocational training, which I know is something you're interested in, like BTECs, are in a state of chaos at the moment. And actually, although you're saying I had a bit of a go at the government, I am actually livid about what's happening with BTECs, for example, at the moment. You know, as tutors are being told, just get on with it. That really isn't guidance for children, and it's certainly not guidance for people coming in to actually assess those young people. So it is very difficult times, but I can assure you that we will be looking at it, and we'll be looking at as many creative solutions as possible to make sure we engage those children, whether that's in some form of alternative education or internships. But, you know, rest assured we are doing that, and please be rest assured that in terms of our safeguarding, especially around missing children, you know, we do know all of those children and we do identify them.
Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'd also like to place on record my thanks to officers involved in this report. Councillor Holland, just a quick one. Could you speak a little and give us some insight into how Newcastle City Council works with schools on safeguarding issues, and especially how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councillor Durrant. I mean, obviously, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, as it is for all of us as councillors, as we are all corporate parents. For schools and education settings, all schools take safeguarding training very I'm trying to think of the word. I can't think of the word. It's critical to how they operate. All of staff are obviously DBS and all checked, all references are checked. So obviously, you know, parents can be assured that their children are safe within those settings. Certainly that what's supported in terms of our contribution from the council is that we do have a multi-agency safeguarding hub, which has an officer who works directly and very, very closely with schools. And that's a kind of multi-agency working, passing on good practice and contributing to making sure schools have the most up-to-date information. It would be useful for me at this point as well to mention that during COVID, we've had a sort of return to schools officers group, which has been offering lots of support to head teachers in all schools. So it's become, if you like, a one-stop shop for everything to do with COVID. So, for example, just prior to Christmas, I think schools had, was it 2-3 days notice of testing in schools, where basically schools were bombarded with guidance that was quite frankly so huge and so complex that people were, you know, really taken aback by it. And our sort of school group said, you know, leave it with us, we'll decipher it, we'll look at it, you know, we'll help get you through this whole process. Because things around testing, for example, are very, very useful for the schools, but also it needs to be done correctly. And interestingly enough, I did read in tests that a school had inquired with the DfE whether volunteers who were coming in to help with testing had to be have the DBS, and they said that wasn't essential. Unfortunately, that won't be the sort of policy that we'll be pushing through our schools, or people who are on site will be DBS'd. So COVID's brought around its own issues around safeguarding. One of the biggest issues in terms of children when schools were locked down was access to children, especially vulnerable children. And social workers came up with all sorts of creative walking in parks, standing, you know, 8 foot away to front door, trying to access children so that they could check on their safety. So safeguarding has been key around COVID, and thankfully, so far, everything is going extremely well. Thank you.
Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Holland, and thank you for raising BTEC a few moments ago, because that's what I want to talk about and ask you questions about, and in particular about parity of esteem. As we know, there are more ways to a degree or on similar qualifications than GCSEs and A-levels. So I'd ask you what is being done to ensure parity of esteem between the academic route and those whose preferences and abilities lead them down the skills path to qualifications and employment. Recently, I did some research for my granddaughter about Newcastle College, who offered degree level qualifications to school leavers with BTEC and similar achievements. And I was impressed by their flexibility and also the provision of support to those with non-standard needs. This is a very viable way to secure advanced vocational and skills-based qualifications. And if we listen to the advice of the Centre for Cities, it's the availability of skills and lifelong upgrading that is holding the northern regions back far more than new roads and railways. Speaking in Parliament today, Education Secretary Gavin Williamson seemed to be entirely focused on GCSEs and A-levels, with not much parity of esteem there. Tossing the issue back to schools and colleges, as his department did yesterday, is an abrogation of responsibility. As yet another inequality is introduced into education, students following the skills and vocation roads are feeling stressed and in limbo, and still the government dithers. So in that context, what representations are being made to the Department for Education and Skills to give those who are about to take BTEC exams a fair crack after all their missed schooling from lockdowns and isolations by treating them in the same way as GCSE and A-level students? That is, to scrap the exams this year and use teacher assessment instead.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. I don't know if you're aware, but I come from a further education background, so I hold vocational qualifications in great esteem, certainly for young people, but also for people returning to work or wanting to train again in a different career in their later life. I found the Gavin Williamson's report today was excruciating in terms of BTECs. You're right, his focus is on GCSEs and A-levels, because we have a government that so many years ago took out sort of continuous assessment and made it all exams based. And obviously, as you're aware, vocational courses, you have continual assessment, you have practical skills, and they are the skills that employers want. Employers do want to see young people with good maths and English and excellent vocational skills, whether they're a plumber, a care worker or whatever. So the issue around BTEC exams really has to be dealt with by the government. And as we saw today, there was no decision made. He has said that providers should go ahead with what they're doing, whether they think it's a good idea or not. So I suspect what we will find is that our services will have to start picking up young people who have been let down by providers, and we will be having to find them additional places or whatever. But in terms of the STEAM idea, you know, the government has taken vocational qualifications out of tables in terms of, you know, achievement. So I think that speaks volumes. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll take the sixth and final question from Councillor Lambert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can you see and hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Paula, for a fairly solidly researched and extensive report. So far, the debate, rightly and understandably, is focused very much on youngsters and young people, with a particular focus on sort of needs. My question is very much looking at the role of adult education in the city, with particular reference to Newcastle City Learn. Now, clearly, adult education, it's not just about employability, retraining, there's also the social benefits and certainly counteracting mental health issues, which have become intensified during the pandemic. My question is, what role do you see the service in providing at the moment? And I understand there's been a recent Ofsted report looking at the provision during this period of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert. Yes, I'm a governor on the City Learning Board, and yes, they have just been had a visit from Ofsted. It wasn't the visit they were expecting. It was actually one that was very much focused on their response to COVID in terms of their learners. So they were looking at how the curriculum had been adapted for the pandemic in terms of online learning and how that met the needs of learners. Because obviously, as we're aware, learners have very different styles of learning. So it was looking at that, and it was also looking at safeguarding, because obviously putting everything online, you also have to look at safeguarding risks about what people are accessing online. So they ended up doing a combination of online, but for some young people, that wasn't going to be an option. So in terms of some of the alternative education, they did have to look at face-to-face delivery, which had to be safely assessed and social distancing and things like that. So the interim visit went very, very well, and they actually did. It wasn't graded, but they said that they thought the provision was very good. So that was really useful. But as you say, also adult education is around far more than exams. It is around mental health, it's around personal development and mental health issues. And I'm pleased to say that we are still providing a full suite of courses and activities. We certainly had some learners doing things like making scrubs for hospitals, artwork, languages, counselling. They all continued. So, you know, and that's a credit to the staff that are there. And I think that's what Ofsted acknowledged when they did do their visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Do you want to make any concluding remarks?
I would just like to say thank you for having a look at the annual report. As I say, it is an annual report, so it is short on sort of statistical detail, but it was just to give a flavour of what's been happening in the schools and in education across the city. Thank you.
Does council agree to receive the report?
Agreed.
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 Not hearing any dissent. So we agree to receive that then. So as regards those two reports, if anyone else wishes to contact the contributors, if they'll email them the questions, there were one or two other people who had indicated they wanted to contribute. If we move on to item 10, which is members' questions, 2 written questions were received this month and the replies to them are included in the items circulated for meeting pack. And as previously mentioned, 1 emergency oral question has been received, and I'll invite now Councillor Stone to read his question to council.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for your assistance in allowing this question to go forward tonight. I think it's an important issue. Can the Cabinet member explain why the Council appears not to have followed its severe weather emergency protocol relating to provision of emergency shelter and assistance for rough sleepers over the Christmas New Year period, given that London and many other cities activated SWEP, given that the overnight temperatures were at 0 below for at least 3 consecutive days, and that according to the Met Office data, these conditions applied in Newcastle between the 27th of December and the 31st.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Hobson to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The severe weather emergency protocol is a discretionary protocol, and it's a very short-term crisis response to rough sleeping, which is encouraged by the government. And during the days that Councillor Stone refers to, the rough sleeping coordinator within Newcastle monitored the actual temperature provided by the Met Office, which didn't actually meet actual zero for 3 consecutive days, and therefore the protocol wasn't invoked. However, Lord Mayor, within Newcastle, we rely on an evidence-based approach and as such have a long-term strategy rather than relying on these short-term crisis management responses, which do not address the structural causes of homelessness and rough sleeping at all. And despite the funding cuts that we've had since the coalition government, we've managed in Newcastle to maintain and to build a really good range of accommodation and support to prevent and address homelessness in Newcastle. And in fact, in Newcastle, it is our ambition to end homelessness and wherever possible to end it and prevent it. And we offer specialist supported accommodation, or we offer reconnection when it's safe to do so for people as well. And we do this all year round, regardless of what the weather's like. It isn't just a crisis management response that we do. It's a sustained response that we do. But during the 5 days that Councillor Stone has mentioned, 13 people were found rough sleeping within Newcastle. 5 of those already had accommodation, and 8 of those were offered accommodation and either refused these offers or refused to discuss accommodation with the Changing Lives outreach team. This is a team that go out every day of the year to offer accommodation and support people found sleeping rough, rather than the short-term crisis management, which ultimately just throws people back onto the streets without support. We've also provided accommodation to those without recourse to public funds as well, which is, beyond what the government asks us to do. But Lord Mayor, the growth of rough sleeping isn't just a local issue, it's a national issue too. And since the coalition government, we've seen a rise in rough sleeping of 141%. Within Newcastle, we've maintained relatively stable numbers of rough sleepers, people sleeping rough. However, our aim is to end people sleeping rough in Newcastle, and we'll continue to do all that we are doing with our partners to do this. It's more than just an accommodation issue. It's a more complex issue of multiple exclusion, health issues, mental health, drug, alcohol addiction. And we're working in Newcastle throughout the year with our partners, Northumbria Police, YHN, Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Wear Foundation Trust, and we're redesigning our accommodation towards moving away from hostel provision, moving towards more self-contained accommodation, and focusing more on the individual, really getting to know those individuals and giving them real targeted support rather than just this crisis approach. We need to make
Can
sure.
you find the answer up, Councillor Hobson, please?
We need to make sure that what we do actually ends the cycle of homelessness, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I acknowledge the council's reputation for working round the year on rough sleeping, but I'm staggered that the council felt it was not cold enough to trigger SWEP when clearly neighbouring councils did, and clearly the Met Office data shows that the temperatures were reaching -4 on some evenings in the period in question. The council is also claiming, I gather from the Chronicle, that they didn't realise that 4 rough sleepers who were reported to them on the council's dedicated rough sleeper hotline were actually sleeping rough. This is especially shocking given it happened on Christmas Eve when it reached -3 overnight. So I'm glad the council is now decided to activate SWEP when it hasn't done over the course of the last few days of cold weather. But I'm disappointed to hear today that the council's hotline call handler told a caller who inquired about SWEP this afternoon that they'd never heard of it. In the circumstances, can the Cabinet member comment on whether she feels that the council's SWEP and its rough sleeper hotline are fit for purpose and are compatible with the council's national reputation on tackling rough sleeping?
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'll just reiterate what I think I've just already answered, and that is that in Newcastle we have a better offer. We go out there every single day and offer support to those people who are found sleeping rough in Newcastle. We don't do just short term when the weather's bad, we do it all year round. That is what I would prefer to happen in Newcastle, and that is what is happening in Newcastle. And I am assured that we offer a really good service to those vulnerable people in Newcastle. We don't just say to them, he has a bed for the night and get out in the morning. We say to them, we don't. We offer them accommodation, we offer them support. What we can't do is we can't force people to take that accommodation. We can't force people to take that support who won't do it. When people contact the council and say, I'm sleeping rough tonight, I need accommodation, we go out there and we offer that accommodation, we offer that support to them. Where they refuse or they don't want to, for whatever reason, we can't force them, we can't do it. What we need to do is get to a place where which is what we do in Newcastle, where we look at the holistic view of it, the whole thing of it, not just can we provide somebody a bed for a night, because somebody who's got complex needs, living in such complex circumstances, doesn't just need a bed. Some people have a bed and still are sleeping rough in Newcastle because there's other issues that need addressed, which we need our partners who have been absolutely fantastic throughout the year, not just over this period, but absolutely throughout the year in working with us throughout the pandemic. You know, that is the police, that is YHM, that's our partners in the homelessness world, and our partnership with Street Zero as well. So I won't take any lessons or anything like Councillor Stone says there. I am assured that within Newcastle, we do our utmost for people within Newcastle, not just this short-term fix that the government is putting out there just to say we've done this over a short period of time, we've funded this over a short period of time. We're out there all year round.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Hobson has actually dealt with many of the bits I intended to deal with in my follow-up, but I would just ask whether she agrees with me that it's regrettable that this has become a partisan potshot issue, as opposed to focusing on the work done by officers, voluntary sector and members of the public, including people volunteering for crisis and shelter and other organisations over the festive period, who did a tremendous amount to bring people in and out of the cold, and that rather than focusing on those successful efforts which made contact with the 13 people previously mentioned, as well as a much larger number of people who were not categorised as sleeping rough, who are in other circumstances, who have already been helped out of accommodation, whether it is, as I said, regrettable to focus on whether or not technically a SWEP was declared, as opposed to the successful efforts of a huge range of people across the city to reach out to homeless people, to help homeless people, rough sleeping and not across the festive period. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Hobson, do you want to reply to that?
Just to say thank you, Councillor Avery, and you know, I'll put a call out now. I think we've got to address at this time, we're back in a lockdown situation. We've got to address what the government's doing now. Everybody in? Is everybody under these under this lockdown and the homelessness? I'm sorry, and in terms of evictions as well. With these are the things that we need to tackle alongside the work that we're already doing. And I would just like to reiterate again to say thank you to all of those who help us deliver our priorities in the city during this time. It really makes a difference to the vulnerable people in our city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. No one else has indicated they want to follow that up. Oh, Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, it's the intention of the Liberal Democrat opposition group to ask the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to consider carrying out a review into the Council Severe Weather Emergency Protocol and its operation. Can the Cabinet member confirm that she would cooperate fully with any scrutiny review of this matter, and that she will agree to meet with NEH to identify how she can work with them to understand their concerns and avoid future problems?
Councillor Hobson.
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Right, thank you. If I can now move on to agenda item 11, which is the 2 Cabinet member updates. The first one is on climate change and communities, and I'll call on Councillor Penny Evans to introduce the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I feel this evening, because we've had the Safe Newcastle report, and I know that my colleague Councillor Holland had the Education and Skills report, I feel like it's a little bit of a double act, and that we'll probably get some similar questions again. But I'm pleased to bring this portfolio report to Council this evening. As members will see, this portfolio report covers a wide range of issues, from tackling climate emergency to supporting communities to keeping people safe. It's been an incredibly difficult year for all of us with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, but our staff really have stepped up to support our communities, keep our residents safe, and continue our work on the climate change agenda. I'd like to put on record my thanks to all staff working across this diverse portfolio of services for their dedication, flexibility and determination. I'd also like to thank scrutiny members for inviting me along in December to discuss my report. And I'd like to thank my Cabinet colleagues for the lead that they take on the climate actions that are within their portfolios, and the Climate Committee for their work throughout the year. Going forward, I believe we need a green economic recovery to combat the climate emergency and to invest in jobs for the future. Our ambition in our net zero action plan is for a green, clean, safe city which values residents, provides sustainable, good quality housing, green spaces, a low carbon economy which addresses poverty and looks to ensure that all people feel invested in and included in and challenging social inequality. Delivered through our task force with universities, businesses, hospital trusts, trade unions and transport providers, we want to accelerate these ambitions when we rebuild post-COVID-19. That's why this plan, the Net Zero Action Plan, cuts across all portfolios, embedding our climate action work into everything that this council does. This year, we have a series of events and summits planned as we build towards COP26 in November, and we will be able to highlight the fact that Newcastle was recognised as being one in the top 88 cities in the world in terms of climate leadership, and one of only 4 cities in the UK. This with our UK pledge 100. the city's race to zero puts us in a really good position to showcase our commitment to climate action. In terms of community safety, I know that as mentioned previously, we've had the Newcastle plan presented earlier, but I'd also like to highlight some of the excellent work that our community safety team do, from tackling antisocial behaviour, our prevent work, tackling domestic abuse, raising awareness of hate crime, and our work on serious violence and criminal exploitation. I want to particularly mention the work of our newly created Newcastle Partnership, which brings together the 4 chairs of the 4 partnership boards in Newcastle. That's Safe Newcastle, the Adult Safeguarding Board, the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, and the Youth Justice Partnership, who have come together to look at cross-cutting issues. This year, we focused on serious violence and criminal exploitation, and I thank the chairs of all these boards and all those who have worked hard to develop a strategy to tackle this via a public health approach. We've been looking at the root causes of crime, developing a tiered approach, and it's an amazing example of working together to look at an issue and using our different perspectives, knowledge and experience to get ahead of the curve and plan. It's clear that we have strong partnerships throughout Newcastle that exist with services, businesses and organisations. It's really what the spirit of our togetherness is built on. It's led to us to develop new ways of working, as I mentioned, with the Newcastle Partnership, but also the Net Zero Action Plan in force. This approach also was built upon the strengths and expertise across organisations, with another great example of this cooperative approach was the City Lifeline, a partnership that saw voluntary sector and the city come together, and it saw thousands of Toon Army volunteers working to support our communities. I thank everybody who stepped up to volunteer or support our communities in different way, whether that's provide food parcels, volunteering to ring people to offer help, whatever they did, it was amazing. And I know that they will continue to do this through this next lockdown, because really that's just what the people of Newcastle do. So I could go on and make many points, Lord Mayor, because it's a really diverse portfolio, but I think I'll leave it there because I know we're short on time.
Thank you, Councillor Penny Evans. There are a number of people who've indicated they want to ask questions. If you please keep your questions brief, make it a question and not a speech, and we can get through as much as possible in the approximately 20 minutes we've got remaining available for this. And can you please put your hands down when the questions have been raised? So I'll start with Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Penny Evans, for a report. I think she's picked up this portfolio very well, and I hope she'll continue chairing the Climate Change Committee, because while she's been chairing it recently, we seem to have made quite a bit more progress. I'd like to dig into some the detail of the report. She says emissions down at the council 44% compared to 2009. I just want to dig into that detail a little bit more, because some of that will be due to the electricity grid rapidly decarbonising, some of it will be due to council estate and services reducing, and some of it will be due to active decarbonisation efforts. So it was the latter. What proportion of that reduction does she think has actually been planned as opposed to happened because of other circumstances? Secondly, on local planning, she says that we have some powerful low carbon policy planning policies. I would hope she could expand on that, because I'm not aware of any. When we, I was critical of our plan of our planning policy for being very generic and not really changing very much. So I would be grateful for a bit more clarity in that. On active travel, which is mentioned in the report, I asked the question at last council of the cabinet member whether the cycle strategy or cycling plan, 10-year cycling plan we all or many of us here voted on in 2012 had been abandoned or not, and I didn't get any clarity in that, so I'd be grateful for that. And then stepping aside from the specifics of climate change, just that comment she made about the Newcastle Partnership. Didn't the incoming Labour administration abolish the Newcastle Partnership in 2011 or 2012. I was just wondering why they decided that that was a good idea to abolish it and then to reinstate it 8 years later. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Penny Evans.
Lord Mayor, is it possible to receive them all at once this time? Because
I thought as previously you would want to take them as they were asked. So we'll
it's just in case I drop out, Lord Mayor.
Right. Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Penny Evans, for the report. It's very exciting to see that Newcastle City Council will have the opportunity to attend COP26 in November and to showcase all of the brilliant work that's being done in order to deliver our net zero commitment. On that note, I'd just like you to speak a little bit more on what your priority actions are going to be in the lead up to COP26. Thanks.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Penny Evans, for the report. Just a couple of things from me. First, I raised this with you at scrutiny, but I don't think we really got anywhere. The report specifically mentions the Hidalgo's 15-minute city concept from Paris as a inspiration for the city moving forward. I want to understand how deeply that's being sort of integrated into what we're thinking, because it is significantly more than just one traffic scheme here and one traffic scheme there. It's a whole change to the way of the planning and urban design is done. So I just wanted to ask that point again. And also on the biodiversity and trees, I know we're still in the process with the tree strategy, and I hope we can see that soon. But I was just wondering how you, whether there was any scope or any consideration at the moment for urban trees and the replanting of trees in streets and urban places. There's several roads around here where we've lost trees, and actually you could quite easily reinstate them without significantly affecting the parking provision, and it would be of great benefit to the urban environment. Thank you.
Councillor Jackie Robinson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Claire Penny Evans, for the report. I did have a question earlier on about domestic violence, but you already answered that. But the next one I want is, obviously I spoke last year in support of the White Ribbon campaign, and I just wanted to know how things are progressing, and when do we envisage starting the training for some more champions? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ash.
Did you call me, Lord Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, you cut out at the critical point of saying my name. Yes. So thank you, and thank you for your report, Councillor Penny Evans. With its clear evidence of the lack of ambition of the administration in setting the city's tree strategy. The Liberal Democrats called in our last debate for many more trees to be planted in a much shorter timescale, but you decided on a target of 19,000 by 2050. Which might be a nice present for me when I'm over 100, but it's totally inadequate as a response to the climate change emergency. Your data shows that last year, the city added 3,000 trees net, less 3, and this year's already on course for 1,900. So a target of 2030 for the 19,000 is easily achievable. It's not even what's called a stretch target. I note this year includes planting 1,500 in Benwell. Is the parish council there contributing? Could parish councils elsewhere be asked to help from their uncapped precepts? In North Gosforth, for instance, despite having the biggest tree canopy in the city, there's space and an appetite from local people to see manicured, featureless grass verges turned over to vibrant, beautiful tree-lined biodiversity. And as a ward committee, Parklands would be willing to chip in from our diminished but held over budgets, and thanks for that sensible decision. So to summarise my 3 questions, will you immediately reduce the timescale for the 19,000 new trees from 2050 to 2030, which this year's figures show is achievable? Will you increase the target to 25,000 new trees by 2030, which last year's figures show is achievable? Will you revisit even these figures and timescales for even more trees sooner? Remember President Kennedy, who said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade, not because it's easy, but because it's hard." Will you ask parish councils to contribute funds and identify sites where trees could be planted to beautify our daily living? And can you empower ward committees to chip in from their budgets to encourage community involvement in plantings and future maintenance of trees?
Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Penny Evans, for the report. I know you've already mentioned tonight about the change in the nature of antisocial behaviour that's been recorded during the course of the pandemic, and I've mentioned also the rise in youth-related antisocial behaviour. But I'd just like to ask that now that we're in lockdown again and that many young people are going to be away from schools, if you're able to give us any information on what's being done to prevent and challenge antisocial behaviour and what we can do over the next few months. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, Councillor Penny Evans. I do appreciate that climate change is something that cuts across all areas of council business. But what disappointed me when we talked to you at scrutiny was that there are a number of things in your report that you had to say, well, that's not actually in my portfolio, and so I can't answer it. And just thinking about it, if the city is going to be taken seriously for tackling climate change, should the member for climate change not have responsibility for the main areas that affect climate change, such as building standards, low carbon retrofit, 15-minute city, electric cars, freight consolidation, all the transport issues. Certainly when we ran the council, my portfolio was environment, sustainability and transport, and it covered all the areas most relevant to climate change. Would that not be a better solution?
Councillor Higgins.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. And in view of my plea for brevity earlier on, maybe I've set myself a challenge. But can I first of all thank Councillor Penny Evans for presenting both of these reports and also for her stoicism in battling with the problems that she's had with her internet connection over the last couple of hours. As a member of the Climate Change Committee, obviously, that will be my focus because that's very high on our agenda. So I'll just very quickly go through my question, which is about effective community engagement. You quite rightly make reference to effective engagement with the public to get the message across. And of course, young Greta Thunberg has been an inspirational figure to so many young people. I am particularly interested in the idea of climate change champions, both in our schools and elsewhere, and also the Net Zero Schools initiative. I wonder, therefore, whether you could comment further on the success of this to date and the level of support from our schools in the city, bearing in mind that they face considerable other challenges at this moment in time. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Penny Evans has now less than 10 minutes to reply to all those questions, so I'll cut them off at that and invite her to reply. And if anyone has got anything further they would want to address, to email her, and I'm sure she'll let us all know the replies. So, Councillor Penny Evans.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think what I'll do is I'll start first of all with Councillor Taylor's question around my portfolio, because when I did come to scrutiny, that was one of the slight disappointments, where obviously there were some questions where the detail and that was required for some of those questions was really in my other members' reports. So I was a little bit disappointed that some members didn't actually understand what was in my portfolio. So I will explain that again in what I've said earlier in my opening remarks, is that climate change crosses everything that we do within this council. It is a part of every single member's portfolio, just as my colleague in schools will be looking at things around school meals and net zero schools, to do with things around social care. We need to be looking at how our carers get around. In terms of transport and air quality, that's where we get the 15-minute neighbourhoods, and around cycle plans. I think it's really clear that, you know, someone who pulls together some of this information, and I work very closely around the net zero action plan, but these actions really do need that in-depth monitoring by individual portfolio holders. And I think it would be incredibly ambitious to expect me to know everything about every single member's portfolio. So I do say that that's because we take the approach here in Newcastle that we have embedded climate change into everybody's portfolio, and it's every member's responsibility and business to make sure that we are doing all that we can to reach our ambitious target of being net zero by 2030. In terms of things such as the trees, and Councillor Ashby asking me about the tree strategy, I have to say that we are really ambitious in terms of trees, but I would like to know what Councillor Ashby would like us to be taking money from in order to be buying more of these trees or investing in trees. So what we have done is actually worked really closely with other North East local authorities, and we have got a hugely ambitious bid in for a North East community forest. We are leading that bid. We could be looking at up to 500 hectares of trees. I think if we are successful and we start our first tree planting in November this year, if we are successful with this bid, we will be looking at where we will be inundated with trees. We will be really looking to really push this massive ambition around trees. I'm sure if money was not an issue, we would certainly be looking at more trees. In terms of biodiversity as well, we've got actions around that, and I know that we have got the DAP, which takes into account of what we're doing around biodiversities, as well as planting and around planning procedures as well. And I think when Councillor Kane mentioned about the thank you, Councillor Kane, for your kind words around my chairing of the Climate Committee. Thank you so much for those kind words. And in terms of the reduction, yes, I think I would have to hold our hands up and say some of that reduction has been about the change in the electricity grid, the reducing of services, but also some of that has also been in the fact of refurbishment of the civic centre, which has really made a big difference on looking at the energy efficiency of the civic centre, and, you know, making the civic centre a really much better place for staff to be able to work, but also for that being able to rent out parts of the city and bring that income back in. And the decarbonisation, we are continuing to look at that. We've got bids in at the moment for up to £25 million of decarbonisation to look at how we can do that across services, whether that's libraries, depots. We've got a really ambitious bid, but unfortunately this government is insistent on saying they've got an action on climate, but it's all about bidding and competing and making local authorities compete with each other for money, rather than having a much more coherent plan where they're looking at initiatives where they fully fund our ambition. In terms of the antisocial behaviour and the young people, yes, Councillor Barnes, I think some of the work that we've been doing in partnership with the police around, and the Police and Crime Commissioner around early intervention schemes are really important to continue, specifically on the YOLO, which is about working with 18 to 14-year-olds to stop them from slipping into crime or antisocial behaviour. We've also got some work around working with families, and we're looking at what we can do again in terms of Family Gateway. We're looking at what we can do around payback money as well, and just basically looking at lots of different ways and where we can redirect people and young people into looking at different avenues and youth work. And I know that the Newcastle United Foundation have been excellent in some of the services they provide as well. So we'll continue to hold SAP meetings and work with partners, and we'll look at geographical spreads of antisocial behaviour. And again, if it's around COVID, we'll be encouraging the police to look at fixed penalty notices. In terms of the white ribbon report, we've done quite a bit of work around that. I think it's key to be able to say that some of the work has had to be put on hold around training, where we've looked to adapt what we can do, because obviously we've had the COVID-19, but it's certainly something that we've continued to do. The leader of the council raised the flag in memorial for White Ribbon Day. We had 16 days of activism and a lead up to around what we can do in the lead up to the around Human Rights Day. And we've got also the things that we're looking at as a plan of action, and we will be looking at rolling out some training. So unfortunately, some of the aspects around training of champions and members was put on hold, but we will be looking to reinstate that. I think what I was going to just say as well, we have started the work for accreditation, but it takes quite a long time. And like anybody would understand, is that we want to make sure that we get that accreditation. Let me just see my list of questions. Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm just seeing where I've got to. Councillor Durant mentioned about our priorities around the run up to COP. And again, some of that will be, we'll be looking to hold some summits, as I mentioned earlier. We're looking, obviously, we need to be making sure that we do those in a COVID secure way. But we'll be looking at having some climate change summits around students, youth climate change. Councillor Higgins will be doing that. We're also doing something around voluntary sector and also looking at the business community, because we want to be looking at champions with each of these areas in the lead up to COP26 and really pushing our ambition and getting the whole city involved with what we stand for and what we're looking to do, because climate change isn't just the city council's responsibility. It needs everybody in our city to take action on this. Individual members, individual residents, individual businesses and organisations, and that's why these summits will hopefully re-engage with lots of different communities across our city to get them enthused and really looking to take pledges to show what action they will be doing in the lead up. So Councillor Higgins, I think that sort of semi-mentions yours as well, but we are looking to have a net zero school, and that links us back to what I mentioned earlier around the decarbonisation plans. But the net zero school will be looking at starting with one school. We'll be looking at solar panels, heat pumps, battery storage and LED lighting in that school. And once we've got one school up and running as a net zero school, we'll hopefully look to roll that out across the different schools within the city. We've had loads of interest from schools. Schools are really excited and really engaged with this. So we're hoping that'll be a great success. And like I say, obviously, we've got a bid in to help fund some of that with ERDF.
Okay, the time for this item is now up. So anything that you've got outstanding, Councillor Penny Evans, if you could just email us all out.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will, like I say, I think there were a few people I've missed, so I will certainly try and get that information to them.
Right, and well done for persisting with your sound problems this evening.
Sorry, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So if I can move on to the second of these updates, which is on education and skills, and I'll call on Councillor Holland to introduce the report.
Right, thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, I want to start by thanking the Education, Children and Skills leadership team and their staff for all their dedication and commitment. I mean, they have gone above and beyond, and they've also demonstrated how caring, but also how creative and resilient they are, and they are truly an asset to this city. I want to tell you that when I was offered this portfolio, I really jumped at the chance, and that's because I do believe in the power of education. As somebody from the north who was raised on a council estate and forbidden to take up a scholarship because I was a girl, I can tell you that I do believe education and the safety of a loving home and community are essential things. I know I was told before not to be too political, but to be honest, I believe we'll be waiting a very long time for this government to level up the North East. 10 years of austerity and COVID has hit this city very hard. I'd just like to remind people Newcastle has the second highest rate of poverty at 35%. That's just behind London at 39%. That equates to 11 children in a class of 30, and that helps illustrate the challenges that we face as a city. It's against this background that it's imperative that our services to children and their families are really crucial and they're central to our city's recovery. That's why I'm proud to present this portfolio and to show that despite such challenges, we are doing the best we can for children to give them and their families the best start in life, the best support we can offer, and ensure that there are opportunities out there for everyone in the city to gain skills, qualifications, and help them to return to work, as well as to keep on learning for pleasure, enjoyment, and for their own personal fulfilment. Lord Mayor, I'm happy to take questions on this portfolio, and I'd like to do as we did before for Claire. I'll take all the questions first and then I'll answer them, as I suspect we might have a little bit of repetition from my previous report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. As you say, there are a number of people have indicated they'd like to ask. So I'll start with Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Holland, for this report. On page 3, you mention the relocation of Broadway East First School, but your comments all relate to the construction of the new school. There are no details relating to the actual move of the school from Parklands Ward to Castle Ward. As this issue is one that has caused some upset amongst parents in our ward, could you please give us a date for the move to the new school building? And could you give us reassurance that this move will not cause disruption to any child living in Parklands Ward? I'd also like to know if Gosforth Park First School is going to be expanded into the vacated buildings so that children who wish to attend school in Gosforth can do so instead of having to travel to Newcastle Great Park. Thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As an NEU member, I am proud that my union, along with Unison, acted to support the health and safety of school students, staff and the wider community by opposing the reckless approach to schools taken by this government. However, while I welcome the move to remote learning for more students on health grounds, I am concerned about the impact it will have on education. In a decent society, all young people would be safe, warm, well-fed, have a quiet space to study and have access to IT equipment. Sadly, we live in a society that's run for the benefit of the privileged few. So many young people in Newcastle will find home learning a struggle. Can Councillor Holland tell us more about what was done by the council and its partners to support these students during the last school closures and what the plans are for this half term? Thank you.
Councillor Cott.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Holland, for your report. It's clear from that report that one of the things that you are prioritising is child poverty, which I'm pleased to see. It's not something which has been emphasised so much in portfolio reports for quite some time, so that is encouraging. But what specific initiatives in your portfolio will help to tackle child poverty? How will you evidence the outcomes? This issue, of course, is becoming more important, not only because of the COVID virus, but because of the outcomes in terms of inequalities that we've been talking about. And she may have, Holder may have seen the IFS Deaton review, which has recently been published, which talks about a number of outcomes for children and young people in particular, which will suffer. And I know there's also been some work that the Sutton Trust has done around remote learning, as Councillor Byrne mentioned, and some issues about social mobility related to that. So you may wish to comment on some of those things. Second question I have is, is a standard one from me. Are you on target to deliver the 3,200 school places the council needs by 2030? I note obviously delays due to the COVID-19 virus around school building, but it would be useful to have an update. And then another question. You've mentioned the Skills Hub, and I've noticed this is mentioned quite a lot in reports that we see to Cabinet and Council and elsewhere. I'm quite concerned about the Skills Hub because I don't believe it is resourced sufficiently to be able to carry out the functions that we need. But what specific measures will be in place to ensure that the Skills Hub is successful in responding to the likely crisis of unemployment, long-term unemployment, and potentially affecting the life chances of young people and potentially long-term unemployment? How will the Skills Hub be able to deal with that? I appreciate this funding that's come from North of Tyne, but it won't be enough to deal with the level of need. So I'd be very grateful for some clarification on that point as well. Thank you.
Councillor Schofield. Councillor Schofield. We don't have Councillor Schofield. We'll come back to Councillor Hickey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, fine, thank you. Well, thank you, Lord Mayor. I would just like to thank Councillor Holland and say how very tough it is to do 2 reports in one evening. So I think everybody who's spoken tonight has done very well. And I'd like to thank her for the comprehensive report, but also in the work that she's done to support schools, colleges, and also adult learning, and also to echo the thanks to workers on front line, many of whom have put their lives at risk. And they've worked tirelessly to keep children and young people safe under very difficult learning conditions. Well, the government's chaotic U-turn this week on school closures has put that dedicated work seriously at risk. It was conceded only after huge pressure from the Education Trade Union and Unison and other unions, and also local authority leadership in Newcastle, which I would include Councillor Holland. All those bringing pressure on the government are fully aware of the importance of schooling for children, their well-being and their development and learning. But they also recognise that it's impossible for schools and colleges to ensure children and young people have access to the education they need while also keeping them safe. This is a massive demand on the staff.
So, question, please, Councillor.
I will get there. The U-turns are not one-off. They are part of a pattern of zigzags, facilitation, and constant failure. And what my concern is with the rise of cases, what happens in the next 2 weeks are critical to whether the virus increases or is contained. The dates set for return to full-class teaching are dangerous and premature, and I would really very much like to hear Councillor Holland's view on how we expose and challenge that Tory callous policy. Thank you.
Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I apologise if I took longer the first time. I wasn't aware of the 3-minute limit. I'd also like to thank Councillor Holland. It must have been a very difficult year to take over this portfolio, so she has my sympathies in terms of that. However, always rising to a challenge, Councillor Holland stated that we should be ensuring that all pupils can participate in online learning. And to add to the comment that's just been made, we were told that 2,000 devices were given to children within the city. However, we know that there are more eligible children for this now. So can she tell us when all children who are eligible for these devices will be given them? Also, during lockdown, we did see an increase in the number of children needing support. And I want to put on record too my thanks to all the social workers and support staff who worked in very, very different circumstances. However, I am concerned that as we find ourselves in another lockdown, that the transformation plans that were part of our family valued programme may not be accelerated, and this may need to put on hold to manage the current situation. Can Councillor Holland advise us of potential threats to this programme and how these may be overcome? My final comment is one that I also made last year. Our children in care do see the local authority as their parent, in the same way as any family who has a business will encourage their children to join in. These children see the council as a business they could join and learn skills, gain qualifications, be nurtured, etc. It may be some of these young people need further support before they are as confident to enter the world as we would hope our own children are. Can Councillor Holland assure us that more of our children in care will become eligible for apprenticeships or jobs within the council, so they feel we are acting as a parent and that we genuinely do care? And my final point is that I'd like to remind Council that yes, it was pressure from Marcus Rashford that got the government to extend and prevent holiday hunger for children who are eligible for free school meals, but it also was a press release from the Lib Dems who got the council to move on this. And I would like Councillor Holland to assure us that strategic plans are in place to ensure that this never happens again. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Moving on from the nonsense of that last remark, can I first of all thank Councillor Holland for presenting two excellent reports, notwithstanding some of the totally unjustified criticisms that she's had this evening and some of the point scoring that's going on. Can I just mention two things from the report that I would like to pick up on? One is about child protection issues and about safeguarding in schools. And I'd just like to ask the question as follows. I note with interest the innovative scheme to invest in social workers in schools through the successful bid to the What Works Centre for Children's Social Care, and would be interested to hear of how the success of this will be monitored and also its long-term sustainability, bearing in mind the pressure on our budgets and on the workloads of our frontline social workers due to government cuts over the past 10 years. And the second point I'd just like to raise, Lord Mayor, is something that's quite dear to my heart, to do with the what was called the Youth Offending Team and now the Youth Justice Team. And my question is as follows. I also read with interest the success of our Youth Justice Team in reducing the numbers of first-time entrants to the criminal justice system and their success in attracting additional funding through the National Youth Justice Pathfinder. Does the Cabinet member therefore echo my view that this shows the value of close partnership working with other agencies in the criminal justice system and the value of early intervention with the most troubled young people in our communities? Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question's already been asked, so I won't go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Holland, firstly, for an excellent report. And thank you for being you and not Gavin Williamson. I think, firstly, my question would be, do you think it would be helpful for a lesson in the definition of question to be raised and passed around council members for future council meetings? And then my main question is relating to the Promise Board, and I was just wondering if you perhaps make a few comments of your own regarding the value it's brought to the city. And I would say that certainly it's been a hugely useful tool. It's been helping drive forward educational standards and helping head teachers across the city. Certainly, as a chair of Governor Byker Primary, the daily reports that we've received from Debbie, Matt, Mark, and I'm trying to think who the fourth person, I beg your pardon, I think it's Ian, have been absolutely exceptional. And I would suspect it's probably unique across the country. So thank you for the report, and just any comment on the Promise Board.
Okay, Councillor Holland, you've got 10 minutes to respond to all those points.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay, in terms of the detail that was asked about schools from Councillor of Corporate Parenting, I'm going to email you direct with some very specific details around those schools. I do have the detail here, but it'll take me a long time to unpick them because it was about 2 different sites. For Councillor Byrne, and it was also mentioned somewhere else around remote learning in schools and things. Yes, there's been a huge push, a huge drive, and we heard in Parliament today about how, you know, everybody should have some sort of laptop or device or whatever for home learning and stuff. And I can say that the city did distribute 3,385 devices across the schools. We did that by doing a survey with parents, which the Department for Education praised for being so inclusive. So we did get devices out for people as well as 4G packages so children can access them. I do share though Councillor Byrne's concerns about remote learning, as I do share a lot of concerns about homeschooling. Not everyone can be this, you know, wonderful picture that we see sometimes that's pushed around by the press. You know, people sitting around the dining table, everybody engaging. It is a struggle. It's a real struggle for people to do home learning. And that does need to be recognised. Not children don't have separate areas to sit and study, not in a lot of houses. And that will cause enormous anxiety and pressure to parents who are actually trying to work as well, or dealing with, you know, the fallout of being on furlough or even losing their jobs. So although home learning is key, I must admit I was rather disappointed today in Williamson, literally talking about how he's made it a legal requirement for 3 to 5 hours of online stuff, and that people should go, parents should complain to Ofsted if they're not getting all of that. It's just this addition, constant adding to the pressure that teachers have to put up with at the moment. So sometimes I think it's a little bit unhelpful to put so much pressure on, even though obviously I think education is extremely important to children and young people. In terms of child poverty, yes, Councillor Cott, that is a real central thrust in terms of my work. Poverty causes huge issues, and issues that can last a lifetime. And what we're about in education is making sure that children get the best opportunities in life so they can go on to work, they can look after their families, they can have aspirations and be creative as young people. Linked into that massively is what our family value programme, and also that was raised before by Christine. We're not going to delay the family value programme. We are going to push on with it. Because we see the huge benefits of having our staff out there in communities working with families and working with children. And what we need is magnets, draws to get them into these centres and work with them. We want to work with whole families, not just with individuals, because, you know, children need to have aspirational parents, they need to have aspirational people around them, they need to have a care package around them. So that sort of programme will be monitored. It's in partnership with Leeds City Council. It's going to be hugely monitored by government. It's all about outcomes, all about evidence, making sure that we are having an impact on families, but also that we're taking them with them. This isn't something that's going to be done to them. This is going to be partnership work in its real sense. And it will involve, for example, health visitors, health practitioners. We're hoping, you know, we can get dentists involved, child play groups, youth work, all that sort of provision. So it will be very, very much evidence-based. In terms of school places, yes, we are progressing. COVID has caused delays, and we've had delays around things like flooding on some of the school sites, but we are pushing on and making sure that we will have places for those children by 2030, because we do have a bit of a lot of children coming through the system after years of it being quite small numbers. In terms of well-being and safety on school sites, Completely agree with what Anne had said and what Jane Bernard said around working with trade unions, working with educationalists about wellbeing on school sites. It seems that the government is very much focused on testing being the main defence. That brings along its own issues. It's fine. We have got the tests. We have had them delivered. We have got staff who are trained, but we are looking for volunteers. Schools have also been informed that they can actually contact the military to help out, because as you can imagine, it will be a huge task to be testing children on sites. As I said in my introduction before, I think school staff, and I mean all school staff, caretakers, dinner ladies, people who help children in the sites, teaching assistants, should be vaccinated. I think if we get those hubs in our communities vaccinated, I think that will have a huge impact on our communities. Let's have a look. Safeguarding social workers in schools is a fantastic initiative. We've got them in 5 schools currently. Those schools are acting as a hub in the way that the Promise Board does. They started in September, October. They're already having a huge impact, and we're getting great reports back from head teachers. So much so that heads have actually put forward another year's funding for them, because we do only have 2 years funding at the moment. Yes, we've got an issue around funding in the council, but this is an initiative that we think we will get huge results from, and it will take some of the strain from teachers in terms of pastoral care. And it'll also, I think, help in terms of how social workers are viewed in schools and communities. They'll be able to get in there and have good, solid relationships with children and parents. And I know from the initial case studies that I've seen that we are having a real impact already. And the schools and the heads are absolutely delighted with the projects. Youth offending team and youth justice. As we've been talking about antisocial behaviour orders tonight and antisocial behaviour, the success of the yachts work because we work in a great partnership. Looking at young people's offending is not something that just a youth justice team can do. It has to comprise of the police, youth workers, early intervention, doing group work with young people, but it's also about education as well, in terms of offering those young people some sort of direction, some sort of aspirations that they can move on in life. So I think the yacht success is absolutely brilliant. It's great to see those figures coming down, but I do think it is part of a huge partnership working programme that is getting results. And in the same way, and Councillor Kemp said about the Promise Board, I sit on the Promise Board myself, and generally just to listen in, because they're talking about lots of different issues that are particular to their schools and stuff. And they are very much focused on educational standards. They're currently doing a lot of research about expulsions from schools, why, how we can look at it differently, how can we keep children in schools. They have a great regard for our return to school group. And I would say they have said themselves that they have a better relationship with the local authority than they have in years, which I think is a huge achievement after local authorities were, if you like, separated out from schools as a sort of government policy. So I do think that the Promise Board is an excellent board and something that we should celebrate. I'm hoping I have covered as much as I can, and if I have missed out anything, please do email me. And as I said before, I will email out specifically the information around the Broadway East School and Gosford site. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Again, I'm sure that there'll be people to follow up. So can I ask if Council agrees to receive those 2 reports on climate change in communities and secondly on education and skills?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Not hearing consent. Item 12 is there are some appointments. Are the appointments agreed as set out on the supplemental agenda?
Agreed.
Agreed. Not hearing any dissent. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, Lord Mayor. I'd like to propose under Standing Order 3D that we alter the order of business, because I do think that the motion on vaccines is absolutely crucial in the current situation, and that it's something we should be debating tonight. So I was going to propose that we bring that before the other motion.
Well, does anyone second that?
I second that, Lord Mayor.
Right. Is it agreed?
Yes.
Agreed.
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 I'm hearing some dissent. We'll have to take a vote. Is it agreed through GoVote, please, to change the order of business? Can I ask our IT colleagues if they will set up the vote, please? Jordan, yeah, thank you. I think it's clear from what we already have that that is not agreed to change the order. So we continue with the items of business as they were originally listed. So the first item 13 then is the notice of motion on West Denton Pool. And I'll call on Councillor Donaldson to move this motion, which is to be seconded by Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I make no apologies for bringing a further motion to this council regarding the future of the Outer West Pool. At the last meeting back in November, Councillor Barnes put the blame firmly on the shoulders of national government for the underfunding of this council. I supported the motion because government does need to help us protect the services that our local people rely upon. Councillor Barnes's motion, however, only told half the story. My motion is intended to address the other half. Several years ago now, the council handed the running of its leisure centres to Greenwich Leisure Limited. I find it incredible that the Labour Party, the Labour Party, would effectively privatise our local facilities and take the decision making out of the hands of local elected representatives. Greenwich have a similar population to Newcastle, but they pay a lower level of council tax. They have more swimming pools than Newcastle, and none of theirs were actually closed in the period when leisure centres were permitted to reopen again earlier in the pandemic. I have to ask myself, is Greenwich better run than Newcastle, or are the profits of Newcastle leisure centres subsidising the more affluent Greenwich area? It's not just Greenwich that seems to be able to manage its own swimming pools. North Tyneside and Northumberland have been able to improve and indeed upgrade their facilities. And this motion recommends learning from those two. The decision to take the decision to close West Denton Pool was taken by Greenwich, which is more accountable to Greenwich for decisions it makes to Newcastle services than it is to the people of Newcastle, or it appears to that itself. Lord Mayor, if you ask anybody who was brought up in the area covered by the former Newcastle Urban District Council, there's a really good chance that they were taught to swim actually at West Denton Pool. Swimming is an important life skill. Indeed, it's a skill which could actually save your life or maybe even the life of somebody else. The closure of West Denton Pool results in the closest swimming facility being at Bladen and Ponteland, both outside the Newcastle City Council area, and requires additional transport and indeed costs. Neither of these pools are particularly accessible via public transport. Are we really satisfied that we'll have a generation of youngsters being unable to swim? Is that really an acceptable prospect? Many people were taught to swim by their parents, often from a very early age. So we're not only just denying today's youngsters the opportunity of learning to swim, but potentially subsequent generations. Swimming also provides the opportunity for those with health and even mobility issues to participate in low-impact exercise, and the inability to participate in some form of exercise can also lead to other greater health issues. It's well documented that any form of exercise is beneficial to mental health and mental well-being, and in these strange times, it's essential that a wide range of exercise is accessible as soon as COVID guidelines allow. As we have seen, temporary closures can often become permanent, and residents of Carleton and Throckley and across the outer west of the city, and indeed the city as a whole, will be concerned that the pool will never open again. This will leave some of the most disadvantaged communities in the country without a swimming pool within a reasonable distance. This council must act to take back control of West Denton swimming pool and urgently identify funds to reopen the pool as soon as the COVID situation allows. Therefore, I urge the council to support this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Donnelly.
Yes, Lord Mayor, thank you. I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. We've received 2 amendments to this motion. So in accordance with Standing Order 17F6, I'll ask for each amendment to be moved and seconded. And then, as we did previously, we'll have a single debate before voting on each amendment in turn. So I'll now call on Councillor Barnes to move the first amendment, to be seconded by Councillor Wright.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. The extended closure of West Denton Pool will have a devastating impact on the community in Denton and Westerhope, and it's clear that the community is distraught at the thought of permanently losing the local pool, and it's easy to understand why. Sport and physical activity have a clear and positive impact on an individual's physical and mental health, while also yielding a positive impact on local communities. This is backed up by research conducted by Swim UK, which suggests that being active in the water helps people's physical and mental health, improves community cohesion, and reduces pressure on the NHS. And I think it's important for us to recognise that it's because this council is committed to these goals of improving the health of the population and supporting local communities that it has acted to support leisure facilities across this city. I have to disagree with Councillor Donaldson about what he's said before. During the period of Conservative and Coalition government, the council was forced to respond to heavy cuts which threatened leisure facilities, including West Denton Pool, by contracting delivery of them out to Greenwich Leisure Limited. And such a move, I think, was vital in ensuring that West Denton Pool didn't fall victim to austerity and to making sure that residents could still reap the many benefits that I've already discussed. It's my understanding that prior to the pandemic, the pool was financially viable, and that the current closure is a result of the challenges faced during months of lockdown and the need to reduce capacity. And importantly, time and again during this pandemic, it's the government that's failed to intervene and provide the city with the support that we need, and to provide support for the leisure facilities, such as the pool. And although some support has been made available through the job retention scheme, the government has refused to provide funding package that the #SaveLeisure campaign, Swim England and others argue is necessary to put this sector on a stable footing and prevent further closures. But as we've seen throughout this pandemic, where there is will to support sectors, the government can provide money that is needed. So I'm calling on the council to back this amendment and call on the government to take further action to safeguard the future of sport and physical activity in the Outer West, and to provide us with the urgent financial support so that West Denton Pool can continue to serve the people that rely on it. I hope that the council will also support the call to involve Outer West councillors in future briefings so that we can work alongside residents in finding a way to rule out permanent closure and find a long-term solution. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
I second this this amendment and reserve the right to speak. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So I'll now call on Councillor Avery to move the second amendment, which I understand is to be seconded by Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thank Councillor Donaldson for bringing this motion forward. My amendment is a friendly one. We are also very frustrated at the loss of leisure facilities in the city, in particular swimming pools. As you know, we have already had the closure of Fenham Pool. This will put schools in a very difficult position when it comes to booking swimming lessons for their pupils. Leisure facilities are not necessarily any safer under the direct control of a cash-strapped city council. The council must give very careful consideration when it comes to awarding any future contracts when it comes to running our leisure facilities in the city. And they must do their due diligence. We certainly don't want to end up in a situation that we've ended up now with Greenwich Leisure Limited. And we demand better for our city. And I call on the council to support this amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second our amendment and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the single debate we're going to have on the motion and those two amendments. So I'll start with Councillor Day. Oh, first of all, can I congratulate Councillor Donaldson on his major speech to council. Well done. And if I can call on Councillor Davison. Councillor Davison.
Sorry, is it Councillor Davis or Councillor Davis?
Councillor Davison, I've got. Davison.
There is no Davison.
Councillor Sandra Davison.
She's an independent.
I think you're muted, Sandra.
She's been on screen. I can see her now, Lord Mayor.
Well, we'll come back to her.
I don't think she knows how to unmute.
We'll come back to her, and Councillor Ainsley, would you like to speak?
Lord Mayor. Sorry. Lord Mayor. There's Sandra there.
Right. Councillor Davis, would you like?
You know what women are like with technology. So, Lord Mayor. Right, so when I was a young girl growing up in Leamington, the youngsters in our streets used to walk to Scotswood Bath on Armstrong Road. By walking, it meant that we could spend our bus fare in the cafe on a hot OXO and a bag of crisps. These days, things are a lot different. Sadly, Scotswood Bath has closed. Most kids will not walk that far, and most of them seem to have more money. However, one good thing these days is that most parents can swim as they were taught while at school at the local swimming pool. This has allowed them to encourage their children to take up swimming and for them all to enjoy being in the pool together. Before COVID, whenever I was at West End shops, I would see children coming out of the pool with wet hair, their swimming clothes and wet towel in a plastic bag, heading into Greggs for a sausage roll. All of them had a happy, smiling face. They had obviously had a great time in the pool. The West End pool is attached to the customer service and Joe Holmes Newcastle hub. It also houses a part-time library as well as the gym. This building has always been an important part of the Outer West. It's where lots of the various communities come together, young and old alike. The pool and gym are not only for leisure activities, but are vital to people's health and well-being. Most people are referred there by their doctors to improve their health, to get fit, to stop them being a burden on the National Health Service. Should the pool stay closed, where are they to go? What about the hundreds of school children who get swimming lessons? Where are they to go? What about the older generation who not only want to continue swimming, but enjoy and need the socialising? Many of them living alone. Where are they to go? Children need exercise. They need to let up steam. They need to mix with their friends. Where are they to go? Over the next few years, nearly 2,000 new homes are going to be built around the area. Many of the residents will want to have the pleasure of going swimming. They will want their children to learn to swim, just like they had the opportunity to do. Where are they to go? West Denton Pool and Gym needs to be kept open. Money needs to be spent on it. It needs to be brought up to date. Anything less than this is a betrayal to the people of the Outer West. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, and I also congratulate you on your maiden speech to Council. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As a woman that can work technology, I'd like to support the First Amendment. I think the benefits of sport and leisure activities on physical and mental well-being for all people of all ages are well documented, and I will support previous speakers, you know, in their support of that. And therefore it's crucial that West Denton Pool reopens. Greenwich Leisure, which actually runs leisure services for over 40 local authorities from Belfast to Manchester, and not just in Greenwich, as well as they have the links with sports governing bodies. Greenwich Leisure was awarded the contract to deliver leisure services in Newcastle to protect these services from the disproportionate cuts that our city has suffered from 2010. And I know Councillor Donaldson was rather scathing about that. I don't see how he seems oblivious to those cuts, and I'm really not sure how anyone could have missed them. These cuts will form part of the austerity measures which were introduced by the coalition government, austerity measures that were actually endorsed by the opposition group on this council. And I can hear them all moan even though they're muted, but it's true. They supported these austerity.
Councillor Ainsley, you've muted yourself somehow.
Sorry, I can work technology, Lord Mayor, but I am having problems this evening, as are many of my colleagues. These austerity measures were endorsed by the opposition group, but it seems, as I've said previously, that Councillor Donaldson is oblivious to this. We need to call on the government to safeguard the future of all leisure services right across the city, including West Denton Pool, by providing the adequate funding for them to be fully opened. I also endorse, as is part of our amendment, the establishment of a working group to engage with the communities in the Outer West. I support this amendment, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shorten.
Mute.
You're muted, Councillor Shorten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the previous speakers across all parties. As an independent, I recognise there's good in them all and good and bad in them all at the same time. I think we've got a consensus here that whatever the situation, that West Denton Pool is essential to the well-being and the neighbourhood decent standards that we have in the Outer West. So many people rely on it. The old, babies, swimming clubs, schools, disabled, the list goes on and on. And I've had the pleasure of using that pool for the last 65 years. And so it's close to my heart. At the same time, I wrote to the CEO and also to our council leader in autumn, suggesting ways that that pool could be opened, subsidising the shortfall in costs between the not-for-profit break-even Greenwich objectives and using COVID funding that was available to the council. I did not get a response from either of those directly, but I did get a response from someone within the organisation, which said this was plainly not possible, and they shared the same ambitions and disappointments as myself. I asked the council to do everything within their means, every single thing, to keep this most valuable resource for the residents of the Outer West, those people who are disabled, but also many disadvantaged nearby. We cannot do anything else. I've learned that where there's a will, there's a way. And I believe this council wants to keep that pool open. And therefore, I believe the council, if they want to do it, can do it. In fact, I was rather puzzled by the delegated decision, which was part of my original suggestion to the council, that was put forward in January to free up £1.6 million of government COVID funding to provide subsidies for the swimming pools on the Outer West, and in particular mention the West Denton pool. The Lord Mayor, this is a friendly presentation. I would ask everybody, I don't care how we do it, which motion we approve, but we must get that swimming pool open as fast as possible. And if that means taking back ownership, if it's a failure contract with Greenwich, then that's what we should do. Because like Ian, Councillor Donaldson rather, I certainly believe that the council, while we're not philanthropic in that sort of thing versus a commercial company, has a greater will and ability than a commercial organisation that's built in the affluent south. So I would also ask you to vote for option 1, amendment 1. Sorry, the original motion, I should say. Please forgive me. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Davis.
Good evening, Lord Mayor. I'd also like to support the First Amendment. The leisure services provided by Greenwich Leisure Limited are vital for physical, mental and social well-being of residents across the city, in particular the Outer West. And as a council, we should be calling on the government to protect these services for our communities. In particular, swimming pools such as the West Denton pool are a community hub and save the NHS millions of pounds every year, which is particularly important during the current crisis that we face. Swimming also provides life skills for both adults and children in our community. When highlighting the importance of the swimming pool, we must query why the pool has been unable to reopen. Local authorities have faced mounting financial pressure for the last decade of Tory-led, Lib Dem sponsored austerity, meaning services were transferred to a charitable trust which were run as a viable business pre-COVID and are now unable to reopen due to a lack of government support. The lack of support and financial backing from government has had a catastrophic impact on businesses such as Greenwich Leisure Limited, the impact which has filtered into our communities. In order to protect the pool and safeguard this vital community asset, government must provide funding to prevent further devastation to the leisure industry, particularly in the North East and our communities in the Outer West. I therefore support the amendment to this motion and call on the council to urge government to action long-term support to leisure services across our city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now call on the seconders who reserve the right to speak in particular order. Firstly, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not entirely sure that we're going to wrap this up before the guillotine, unfortunately, and I hope there's a point of order on that subject in due course. I'm pleased to support the opposition's amendment to this motion, which is intended to be a friendly amendment. Residents in the Outer West of the city understandably feel like they're often overlooked, and I've no doubt that the loss of a valued community facility will be felt keenly by all those who benefit from it. The purpose of our amendment is not to wreck it or to force a particular solution on the issue, which may or may not produce the desired outcome, but rather to give the city the greatest possible chance of success in maintaining West Denton Pool's provision for local residents. The funding environment for leisure facilities in the city is exceptionally challenging. The opposition recognises the challenging financial position the council's in. We would therefore have concerns that this financial commitment would be unsustainable in the long term, simply resulting in a postponement of the closure. Similarly, I have doubts that the council's default assumption that the government should fund everything will be satisfied by a Tory government seemingly lurching from one crisis to the next like a bunch of clowns in a comedy car, but without the laughs. Government intervention on an emergency basis is entirely appropriate. Councillor Barnes recognises the pool was viable pre-COVID, and it must be said that the role of GLL in the long term remains to be seen. So I wouldn't dispute the need for government support in the short term, but what about after that? Our amendment rules out no options. It includes all of the above that have already been discussed. So I would urge the council to support the opposition's amendment, which gives the greatest possible chance of success for West Denton Pool to serve the community once again. But given that the opposition's priority is ultimately to support the Outer West, to see its facilities once again in service, we will support any resolution that supports this aim. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Residents of my ward have always had to travel to visit a swimming pool. I used to take my sister to either Fenham or Scotswood baths, both of which were a bus ride followed by a fair hike to get to the swimming baths. We were very lucky that we were given enough money for the bus fares and the entrance fee, and also, in our case, a hot black currant afterwards. It was because of this that my mum, Belle Nixon, campaigned for a swimming pool to be built in Throckley. The baths known then as Newburn baths were eventually built in West Denton. However, back then, late 60s, early 70s, we had a bus which took us directly to the facility. Over the years, the bus was taken off, but families still use this pool. I feel very strongly that the writing was on the wall when Greenwich took the decision to close the training pool. So when lockdown came, they grasped the opportunity and advised the public that they would probably not open the pool again. However, at the same time, they extended their gym offer. There are many, many gyms in the area. So the offer for adults who use the gym for health reasons is manifold. But for children and adults who use the pool, this is now no longer available. A family travelling to, for example, Biker, have to use either one or two buses, depending on where they live in my ward. And for families, that adds further cost, which for a lot of families would be a barrier to stop them from going swimming. The council was put in this position because of the unfair budget cuts we have suffered year on year for the past 10 years. We need our pool. I would urge council to accept the First Amendment and urge government to provide financial support to enable leisure facilities to be kept open. And as an Outer West councillor, I would be happy to take part in an informal working group. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Outer West Pool closure is not only a loss to the health and well-being of residents, but it is a failure to meet the council's own core principles, allowing a valuable facility to be run down from the training pool closure in the winter of 2018 to all swimming facilities closed this year. The council has actively encouraged mass housing development in and around the Outer West, with a resulting rise in population, but has failed to address the justifiable needs arising from it. The council is offering less services to a larger population that quite reasonably expect quality and fairness in cross-city provision. The inability to use capital receipts, S106 funding, or CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, and the political unwillingness to invest in new pool plant equipment has led to this outcome. Our residents deserve as much as our neighbours and expect more and better from this administration. As we debate tonight, the council is proposing to sell even more of the diminishing and irreplaceable land bank. However, none of the proceeds of sale will be used to provide facilities within the area.
You've become muted, Councillor Donnelly, for some reason. Councillor Donnelly?
Can you hear me, Lord Mayor?
Well, you're back now.
Right.
You were talking about SIL.
All right, and I'm way back. Right. Can I go back to that part, Lord Mayor?
Yes.
Right. The council is offering less services to a larger population that quite reasonably expect equality and fairness in cross-city provision. The inability to use capital receipts, S106 funding, or CIL, Community Infrastructure Level, and the political unwillingness to invest in new pool plant equipment has led to this outcome. Our residents deserve as much as our neighbours and expect more and better from this administration. As we debate tonight, the council is proposing to sell even more of its diminishing and irreplaceable land bank. However, none of the proceeds of sale will be used to provide facilities within the area. The City Council, led by Nick Forbes, asks the government to level up the North East with the rest of the country. As we in the Outer West ask the council to level up with our closest neighbours of North Tyneside and Northumberland. North Tyneside Mayor Norma Redfern runs all of her council leisure facilities in-house. Northumberland County Council is investing 65 million on new and improved leisure facilities. In light of the above, the council is asked to take over the running and control of the Outer West Pool to meet the needs, health and well-being of those in our community. The First Amendment is basically stating, for the benefit of any doubt, that if the government does not step in, then the fate of the pool has been sealed. The Second Amendment provides a better option of looking for an alternative provider. Any provider would be better than Greenwich, who have such a poor history of running the facility down. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
I call on Councillor Donaldson to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When standing to be elected as a councillor, I stood on a platform of not really becoming overly embroiled in party politics, possibly naively so. The win-lose aspect of the debate is not of any great interest to me. All I want to see is a win, in inverted commas, for the residents of Callan and Throckley, and further afield across the entire city. Neither amendment really delivers the key element of the motion, and that is to give the City Council control of the management of this leisure service. I'm a little bit perturbed as to why the City Council feels unable to return the management of West Denton Pool to the City Council. Councillor Ainsley doesn't seem to have much confidence in the council's ability to manage a swimming pool. So what hope do we have for us to manage a whole city? Can I just add, with regard to Councillor Ainsley's comments as well, I've never approved any government cuts or endorsed any government cuts, and nor have I ever approved any subsidising of any major hotel chains. Lord Mayor, it's clear that Labour effectively the privatisation of Newcastle swimming pools has failed, and that a company running Greenwich is never going to be looking out for the interests of the outer west of Newcastle. We are 6 miles away from Denton Pool, and if it feels as though nobody cares. So why would an organisation 300 miles away care? I recognise Councillor Alves' amendment recognises the point, but this amendment only changes the third-party organisation who potentially could manage West Denton Pool, why would someone like Jesmond Community Leisure be maybe quite a bit closer than Greenwich, but why would it act any differently? Councillor Wright obviously recognises that Greenwich motives are questionable after the closure of the training pool. So I just cannot believe that we are going to entrust the future of the pool back to Greenwich in any which way. Just to maybe build on what Councillor Donnelly said, you know, it's got to come back into the hands of the local council. We should be answerable to the electorate. Instead of hiding behind third-party organisations like Greenwich. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that. So we now have to vote on the First Amendment. So I'll ask you to vote on the First Amendment, which is that proposed by Councillor Barnes. So if I can ask our IT to set up a go vote, please. The question is the amendment carried? Is Councillor Barnes' amendment carried? Well, Councillor Barnes' amendment is carried. I've noted Councillor Huddart's message there. So the amendment now becomes the substantive motion. So I'll now ask Council to vote on the second amendment, which is Councillor Ave's amendment. Is Councillor Ave's amendment agreed?
Agreed.
We're getting a go vote. Vote number 9 on your devices. So that amendment is not agreed. So the substantive motion remains as the First Amendment. So does Council agree the substantive motion? That's the motion as amended by Council.
Agreed.
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 So that amended motion is carried. Now, we now have this point of order to return to, which was given earlier. Does Council agree to suspend standing orders for 30 minutes?
No.
Is that seconded?
Yes. No.
No. No. No. No.
Can I ask our right?
No.
Agreed. Another vote, please.
No.
So the question is, are we to suspend standing orders?
Yes.
You've got that vote now, vote number 11 on your device. So that proposal is defeated. So we do have a number of motions to work our way through. Where are we? Let's see. The item number 14 is the motion on the vaccine contract. Can I ask Councillor King if he wishes this to be dealt by a vote this evening or to be carried over to the next meeting?
Vote this evening, Lord Mayor, please.
Right. So can I ask, does Council agree the motion?
Agreed.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Agreed.
There's an amendment and it's not noted in my papers. So
we'll have to vote on the amendment, Lord Mayor.
Right, I've got the amendment now. Is the amendment agreed as
Sorry,
proposed?
Lord Mayor, the motion hasn't been seconded yet.
Right, I beg your pardon for this. First of all, can I ask for that motion to be seconded?
I second the motion, Lord Mayor.
Right, I'm now calling Councillor McCarthy then to move this amendment.
I'll move that amendment, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
And seconded by Councillor Kilgour.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Right, so can I ask then if the amendment is agreed?
No.
No.
Right, can I ask RIT to put a...
Agreed.
Agreed.
No, I'm going to have to ask RIT to put this to the vote, please.
Oh, well.
So the amendment is agreed. So the amendment now becomes a substantive motion. So is the motion agreed?
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Not hearing any dissent. Thank you. Moving on to item 15, which is the motion on carers. Councillor Huddart, do you wish this to be voted on this evening or held over?
Well, I would like it to be held over, Lord Mayor.
Okay, we'll hold that over to the next time.
Sorry.
And the final notice of motion is on the real estate investment trusts. Councillor Hobson, do you wish this to be voted on this evening or held over?
This evening, Lord Mayor.
Right. There's no amendment to this motion, so does Council agree? Is the motion seconded? Councillor McCarthy?
Agreed.
Seconded.
Needs seconded first.
Yes, Councillor McCarthy?
I'm happy to do that, Lord Mayor, yeah.
Right. Is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
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 Not hearing any dissent.
There's an abstention on the notes.
Somebody's
Lord
put
Mayor.
abstention. Are we voting on it?
No.
No.
I'm not hearing any dissension.
There are
There's
several
three
abstentions, Lord Mayor.
On the chat.
Yeah. Well, so there are abstentions.
I think we'll need to vote on it then formally. Can I ask RIT to do this? Is the motion on real estate investment trusts agreed?
Yes.
So that motion is also carried. Well, thank you, colleagues, for all that. That closes the business for this meeting. The next virtual meeting will take place at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of February. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Good night.